Good evening, everyone. Just want to make sure folks can hear me okay. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Present.
Councilmember DeBala.
Present.
Councilmember Gibson.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Honzak
Present.
is muted, but she is here on Zoom.
Present.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Excellent. And Councilmember Small.
Yes, y'all, and you don't stop.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I want to thank everybody for coming out this evening. There are no changes to the agenda, but I am going to go through the next few meetings for the next few weeks. Today is Wednesday, the 28th. The first item is a second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. We also will have 2 work sessions this evening. The first is a proposed multifamily housing tax credit, followed by a presentation on the library construction project update. On Thursday, tomorrow, the 29th through Friday, March the 1st, I will be attending the Maryland Mayors Association Winter Conference. On Wednesday, March the 6th, the City Council will be meeting at 7:30. Currently on the agenda is an update from the Council's working group on committees, as well as 2 voting items. The first reading ordinance amending the city code to ban combustible engine-powered leaf blowers. The second reading ordinance authorizing a contract for the Bashir's Run outfall repair and stream restoration. And then there's 2 work sessions. One, facilities regulations review, and the second is a discussion of grant-funded contract with MACOA Services for the stabilization of the vacant Washington McLaughlin School site at 6501 Popular Ave. On Monday, March the 11th through Wednesday, March the 13th, many members of the council will be at the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference in Washington, D.C. On Wednesday, March the 13th, we, of course, will have our regular legislative updates, but we'll also have a presentation from our police department on its annual report. And we will have 2 potential voting items. One is a second reading ordinance amending the city code to ban combustible engine-powered leaf blowers. And the second is the second reading ordinance approving a contract with MACOA Services. And we have 2 tentative work sessions. The first is the FY 2025 budget priorities resolution on the rec center next steps. And the second tentative item is the council budget working group presentation. On Wednesday, March the 20th, the city council will not meet. And so this evening, we will start with our legislative update. And so with that, I will turn things over to our legislative lobbyists in Annapolis and CCOP.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I am speaking to you on the other side of the halfway mark of the legislative session. We just got through halfway, and we are coming up quickly on the crossover deadline, which is March 18th, which I know sounds like far away, but it's coming up quick, and that's when the House has to have House bills over in the Senate, and the Senate has to have Senate bills over in the House in order for things to continue smoothly through the process without extra hurdles. This week, the city weighed in on a couple of bills. Or we'll be filing bill for early next week related to ranked choice voting and a bill related to allowing local governments to be able to lower maximum speed limits without additional hurdles. We are going to be talking about a slew of other bills that we are discussing related to the environment and related to some other issues, follow up to the bills that we've been talking about related to housing, related to the environment. The work continues. We talk about sometimes the things that, we've done some testimony on, but it's, really the follow-up work that has a big influence as well.
Great, thank you so much. I believe Councilmember Small has a question.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Ann. I appreciate you and everything you do. And I wanted to apologize to you for being waylaid by the weather when we were supposed to have our last meeting. The thing I am asking you about, though, is if there is, in your impression, a theme or a general sense as to what the House of Delegates is planning on doing with this session. I mean, I know that the mayor does talk about it, but I know that the governor continues to harp on housing. But is there a direction with regard to this legislative session in your assessment?
Yes, the governor has put a lot of money in the capital budget for housing production. He has legislation in that does various things to try to encourage and support the construction of new affordable housing units. And he has a bill in related to renters' rights as well, to try to support renters. So there's a lot of talk. I think that there is a lot of support in general from the General Assembly on these efforts. Devil's always in the detail. And so, there's one of his housing bills deals with some zoning and some permitting and all. And so it seems like there are a lot of entities, especially local government entities, weighing in to try to make sure that there's a balanced approach. So I'm not an expert on that
Fantastic
kind of
answer.
stuff, so I don't know what balance means, but folks are working on that.
Thank you.
All right. I am not seeing any other lights. And I think that's because some of us have been frantically writing to try to get testimonies together. And there are still more in our list of items to send forward. So we are so thankful to you, Anne, for all that you're doing for the city in Annapolis. And fingers crossed, I will be seeing you tomorrow in Annapolis. As I am down there for
MML Advocacy Day, right?
MML Advocacy Day. So, but
Excellent.
super excited. Oh,
I think there is at least one other council member who's attending.
I'm going.
okay, perfect. Thank you. Councilmember Fulcher will also be in Annapolis.
Great.
But I won't be there, so sorry.
Excellent. All right. Seeing no more lights, Anne, you get off a little early tonight.
It's wonderful. Thank you. I get the rest of my work done.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and have a great evening.
Good night, everybody.
Okay. All right. So I see that we have a number of residents in the room this evening. And so first, I just want to say welcome and thank you all for coming here tonight. I do want to just give a little bit of context around how public comments work, just to make sure that everyone understands. And I also want to just take a quick moment to explain to the group around where we are as a council. It has been brought to our attention about the need for identifying a way for the city to support our residents who are impacted by what is happening in Gaza, be it through support for the release of hostages and family members, or through support for allowing for humanitarian aid to reach those residents or those people in Gaza that in many places in our community are family members and friends and loved ones. And I want to make sure that everyone has that opportunity tonight to be heard. I'm just asking for everyone to show grace and respect for all of our members of our community. I think it's critically important for us all to make sure that we have a safe space for everyone to express their views without fear of any kind of negative retribution or retaliation or anything like that. And so I just want to thank those that have been coming in week after week and have been expressing your concerns and thoughts in a peaceful way. And because we have new members here tonight, I just want to encourage that trend to continue. And so the way this is going to work, we will first start with public comments on voting items, okay? And those voting items is the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. So I will ask if you have any comments on that topic to come forward. Just as a reminder for everyone when you're speaking this evening, it would be helpful for you to tell us your name and where you live, which ward you live in. And then you will have 3 minutes to make your statements. I am begging for everyone to please respect one another by sticking to your 3 minutes. And that is going to be the way we can ensure that everyone has their opportunity to speak, okay? So again, we're going to start with public comments on voting items, and then we will have general public comments. And I'm asking for everyone to just say your name, where you live, and stick to 3 minutes. Can everybody do that for me? All right, wonderful. Thank you
Also,
all.
Mayor, point of order, I just wanted to also mention to the voluminous crowd that is here today that often doesn't come and perhaps may not even watch that because I have a chronic illness, I bop around so that I don't have to process stress inadequately. So no one should take it personal if I am doing such things, because I am a pretty even-tempered and even-keeled person unless people say crazy things to me.
So again, just this is Tacoma Park. We know how to do this. We know how to be civil. We know how to respect one another, and we know how to respect the 3-minute time limit, right? All right. So let's get started with public comments on voting items. So just as a reminder, the voting item for this evening is the second reading ordinance approving FY 2024 budget amendment number 3. Do we have anyone that has any public comments on the FY 2024 budget amendment number 3? Okay, Councilmember Small? No worries. Just want to check with the clerk to see whether or not we have any virtual comments. No, we don't. Thank you very much. Oh, I should have said this as well. We have comments that happen in the room first, then we will move to virtual comments. Okay? So if you're sitting here, don't worry, you're not going to have to sit through all of the folks online first. Okay? All right. So do we have any public comments on any non-voting items? Come on down. You're welcome. If folks, so one thing just out of respect for everyone, if we have people who have any kind of physical disabilities who maybe can't stand in line and need to go first, just raise your hand and we'll make sure that you're able to come down. Okay? Any people that can't stand in line? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And excellent. We're going to go ahead and get your mic on. There you go.
Okay, thank you. I'm Naomi Edelson. I live in Ward 5, and I've lived in Tacoma Park since 2010. Thank you first to the Public Works Director for responding to a pothole. I sent her a note. She responded right away. And hopeful thank you to the mayor for hopefully signing a mayor's monarch pledge, which I will share with you that the previous mayor signed and supported for activities we can do to help save the monarch in our city. Thank you to the new city manager who's been very responsive. I really appreciate that. And these are the things I hope and want my city to do to help our community. What I do not want is the city to pass a ceasefire resolution on the Israel-Hamas war. It is divisive in our community, and I believe it will lead to an unsafe environment for Jews living in our community. Here is what I am for. I am for peace in the Middle East. I am for a two-state solution. I am for humanitarian aid for the suffering Palestinian civilians. I am for the release of the Israeli and other foreign 130 plus hostages that have been kept for almost 150 days. And I am for the fighting to cease. I am for both Jews and Israelis, and I am for Palestinians. And I acknowledge the suffering of both. I am not for anti-Semitism from the far right or the far left. And I believe this resolution will lead to emboldening the anti-Semites under various disguises and supposed morality. Under the cover of Free Palestine, many are using it for Jew hatred in many forms. The rise of anti-Semitism has been astonishing. Just yesterday, the police in Berkeley were overwhelmed, and students, Jewish students were, I'm really upset, were attacked and hurt. In Florida, a synagogue, protesters came in and attacked and hurt people there too, and the police were called in. Here in Montgomery County, we have experienced a tremendous rise in our schools. My son is in these public schools. We have very visible anti-Semitism. I grew up in Cambridge, Mass., a progressive community like Tacoma Park, and I experienced traumatic anti-Semitism. We moved to a nearby town. I again experienced it. Then I went to college, and then I experienced it. Then I lived in rural areas in Maine and Florida, and I experienced it. I've experienced it at all my workplaces. This is my whole life, my whole lived experience. I want my community to be a safe place for me and my Jewish family. But today, I considered calling the police because someone parked in my driveway for 5 minutes. I didn't know who they were. I felt that scared that somebody was coming to hurt me that I almost called the police. I waited and they left. But, you know, we can be for both people, but this resolution will not do that in this current climate. I ask you to not craft and pass such a resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't see the timer. Can I start?
As soon as you just say your name
Okay.
and where you live, and then you'll see the
Uh,
timer.
Good evening. Thank you for representing us. My name is Rebecca. I live in Tacoma Park. Cindy, in Ward 3, Cindy is my representative. I've lived in Tacoma Park for 10 years. And I echo Naomi's sentiments. I think the situation in Gaza is catastrophic and horrible. Israeli citizens have also been traumatized. I think a ceasefire is the right thing. However, I believe it is not within the purview of the City Council to be passing resolutions on world affairs. Moreover, I think this issue is incredibly divisive and has led to anti-Semitism in part because many conflate all Jews with the government of Israel. I don't support the current government of Israel, but I think that's why this issue is incredibly divisive, and I favor the council not taking up this resolution. I don't want my tax dollars spent on the Middle East issues. There's plenty of people working on that already. So thank you for listening. Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Is there any way to do anything with that light? No,
I
okay.
wish there were.
Okay,
We are sweating bullets right now.
okay. Hello, my name is Risa Shaw. I'm in Ward 2. I'm a longtime Tacoma Park resident. I know that this and past city councils are capable of a lot, capable of compassion, making hard moral decisions, and caring for people. I'm a Jew, and I'm here to speak in favor of a strong Tacoma Park resolution supporting ceasefire. The Israeli government has slaughtered huge numbers of people, Palestinians, over 30,000 Palestinians, and over 12,000 of them children. I understand that Jews around the world feel unsafe. I have never felt safe as a Jew. Not growing up in Kansas and Nebraska, not living in D.C., in this D.C. area for 43 years, and not living in Tacoma Park for nearly 35 years. I'm a Jew. There's anti-Semitism everywhere, and it's a part of what I live with. Just like homophobia because I'm a lesbian, and just like misogyny because I'm a woman. It increases and it decreases depending on the times and the area I'm in. I also understand that our Muslim, Palestinian, and Arab neighbors feel just as unsafe, if not more, and with very, very good reason. Let's be clear, the Israeli government is not doing anything to make me or any other Jew safer, and in fact, their actions are making all of us less safe. They are killing thousands of innocent people and forcing them to move and move again and move again, each time into areas that the Israeli government then goes in and bombs and starves and kills more people. There is no neutral here. There is no way to be neutral. There is no way for this not to be divisive because of things we've already heard. I get that. I know that. I feel it. I experience in my family. I experience it with my friends and in my neighborhood. Not passing a resolution in favor of ceasefire is equivalent to supporting the Israeli government and their ongoing killings. Support of the Israeli government is equivalent to supporting a government of Trump or worse in this country. I want my city to speak out to stop the killing. I want our city to demand that our federal government stop its support of the strategic killing of all people. It is the least that we can do to pass a resolution. Please do not shy away from this issue. Create and pass a strong resolution calling for ceasefire. Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you very much. Come on down.
My name is Maria Emilia Morazan. I live in Tacoma Park, Maryland. I'm here in favor of a ceasefire resolution. I feel rage. I will not bypass my anger for your comfort and your convenience. I feel rage at your cowardice. I won't call it ignorance because you have been in these meetings, you have seen the images, you know what is happening. Where is your moral leadership? Where is it? You should be ashamed to not pass something as simple as a ceasefire resolution in Tacoma Park, Maryland? How dare you call yourselves leaders of this city? I invite you to step into your humanity, to step into your power, and to pass a ceasefire resolution now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rabbi Abby Sharofsky. I'm the Director of Intergroup Relations and Rabbi in Residence for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. I am grateful to be here tonight, although I am not a Tacoma Park resident. I speak on behalf of those who cannot. I am here tonight to address the ongoing conversation about a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza and the impact of such a resolution on residents of Tacoma Park. Since October 7th, communities around the world have struggled and cried out in pain. Jewish communities, Muslim communities, and Christian communities, Arabs, Israelis, and Palestinians. I am not here to deny or minimize the suffering of any group. I grieve for those killed in Israel on October 7th, for Israelis who were brutally raped and tortured, and for those taken hostage by Hamas. I pray that they will be freed and can reunite with their families. I pray that the leaders in Israel work toward peace. But my prayers don't end there. I pray for the Palestinians in Gaza, for their safety, and that there will be leadership in Gaza that strives for peace. I grieve the tremendous loss of life in Gaza and the deaths of children and of families. It is complex and difficult recognizing the pain and suffering of so many, especially in polarizing times as these. My fear and the fear of so many Jews, and what brings me here tonight, is that a resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza will only add to that pain and polarization. It will show Jewish residents of Tacoma Park that their fear is not taken seriously and their experiences can be ignored. It will not address rising anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or other forms of hate and bias experienced by residents on a regular basis. My fear is that it will add to it. As we all await news of the release of hostages and the cessation of fighting, negotiated by world leaders, this city council has a duty to hear the voices of its constituents and recognize the importance of holding the pain of many groups. Resolutions should be unifying. I implore you to consider how this resolution will drive deeper divisions between residents and recognize the complexity of this moment and the power it has moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Small.
Hey everybody, my name is Matt Bormett. I live in Ward 3 in Randy's district, and also own a business in Ward 3 that many of you were at our grand opening back in July, a little bookstore that we opened, and I'm very proud of that. I've got 2 kids here in Tacoma Park, 3-year-old and well, she'll be 3 next month, and a 5-year-old. And we moved to Tacoma Park 4 years ago, largely because I wanted my kids to be in a community with lots of different people with lots of different backgrounds. I wanted them to be in a community where they could be engaged with the world, and that was my experience with Tacoma Park when we moved here. I don't want to talk about the sort of carnage that we've all seen, and I think you all are well aware of events in the Middle East. What I really want to do is give you something I'm sure you hear plenty of, which is political advice on why it's important for Tacoma Park to take action on a ceasefire resolution as quickly as possible. As a former congressional staffer, I'll tell you that members of Congress pay attention to what happens with their local and state elected officials in a way that nobody else really does. Members of Congress are terrified of you because they think you're going to run for their seat someday, and that's particularly true in Tacoma Park. And so, you know, I really think it's important that you all take a stand on this issue because we have the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee representing the state of Maryland in the Senate, Ben Cardin. We've got a Senate election coming up later this year with 2 candidates who I haven't heard a whole lot on this issue, and I think you could move them should you take action. And we have a great representative and a friend of the store, Jamie Raskin, who's certainly in a position of power to hear from you as well. I just would ask you to consider the power that you have, and I know it firsthand, having worked for members of Congress, that they care about what you're doing. They will yell at their staff if they don't know about it in time. Not me, of course, I was always perfect. And so I really would encourage you to consider the power of a resolution to move those federal players. You all are not the United Nations. I don't ask for you to negotiate the conflict. But your speaking out on this can have an impact at more than just the, 18,000 people that live in Tacoma Park. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mara Vandenbold. I've been a resident of Tacoma, DC since 2019, but that means I live and work and eat and play with my kids in Tacoma, Maryland daily. I'm here tonight to ask you to consider passing a ceasefire resolution in relation to the ongoing humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. I think we're all familiar with the numbers. Nearly 30,000 Palestinians have been killed since mid-October, including around 13,000 children. Over 69,000 have been wounded. 80% of Gazans have had to leave their home. A quarter of the population now has an acute lack of food. And these numbers are, of course, not just numbers. They have faces and names, and they are lives that were cut short very violently. I think the only way to stop the ongoing violence is a ceasefire. At least 48 cities in the U.S. have passed ceasefire resolutions, and this adds pressure nationally and globally for an end to the military campaign by Israel and, by extension, the U.S. on Palestinian civilians, and will ultimately allow humanitarian aid to enter the Strip. It'll show public commitment to the fact that a peaceful and long-needed resolution is not reached through violence, but through conflict resolution and restorative justice and diplomacy. It also acknowledges that a ceasefire is the only way for Israeli and other hostages to be freed. And it signifies to Tacoma Park residents and residents of other cities that Tacoma Park stands for justice and human rights for all at home and abroad. I think adopting a ceasefire resolution will not mean that those supporting a resolution in any way condone what happened on October 7th or condone any kind of form of anti-Semitism. It will also not signify a kind of specific political statement per se, but a humanitarian one. And finally, I don't think it will counteract efforts by the U.S. administration to reach a cessation of hostilities, and it'll make a statement that Tacoma does not stand for aiding and abetting this violence. I'm proud to be a neighbor of Tacoma Park. My family moved to this area because it's a progressive and diverse place where differences are respected and celebrated, and it's a place that has stood and stands for many a social justice cause. By adopting a ceasefire resolution, Tacoma Park will show its residents and neighbors and other cities in the U.S. that we are a community that's united behind principles of peace and human rights. And I'll just end with this quote. I'm not sure who it's from, but I think it kind of captures what I'm trying to say. Ceasefires should never be controversial to anyone who truly wishes for peace. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'm a parent and a Jewish American. My name is Harold Fuller Bennett, and I've lived in Ward 3 for 12 years. The October 7th attack jarred me, left me feeling vulnerable and scared. It reminded me of the Holocaust and of a potential genocidal threat against Jews that I have not seen or felt in my lifetime. I started seeing anti-Semitism everywhere, not so much here in Tacoma Park, but on the news and social media, and I was scared. My first response to this fear was to say, well, Israel was attacked and they have every right to defend themselves. I was disturbed by individuals whose reaction to October 7th did not include horror at the violence of that day, and I was not at the time for a ceasefire. In the ensuing months, I have attended numerous community family events where art and signs were created calling for ceasefire. I came more as a parent than as an advocate because my feelings on the matter were muddled. At these events, I have met many of my Arab American neighbors and learned about the fear they have felt since October 7th, as anti-Arab sentiment has surged along with anti-Semitism. Not once at these events did I witness any words or actions that were in any way violent or anti-Semitic. I experienced these events as safe and supportive spaces, these events in Tacoma Park and Tacoma, DC, as safe and supported spaces building community around shared concerns and hopes. I was not for a ceasefire on October 8th, but after more than 4 months of war, with thousands of civilians dead, at least 1 million homeless, and famine looming, the only decent demand that can be made now is for ceasefire. For our city and our council to do anything else would be to express tacit support for the use of our tax dollars to slaughter civilians and destroy civilian infrastructure in Gaza. I want to live in a community in which citizens love and support one another, where violence on the other side of the world is a reason to come together with moral clarity, not to fight amongst ourselves. A community where the legitimate fears of Muslims and Jews are not weaponized to support further violence. A community that holds a commitment to peace whenever and wherever possible. I believe that a resolution calling for an end to the fighting in Israel and Gaza is a valuable and necessary step towards creating this type of community. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on down.
Good evening. My name is Mark Harper. I live in Silver Spring, but I serve as pastor of Tacoma Park Presbyterian Church in Ward 1, I think. Been here for about 2.5 years and am honored to be a part of the community. And I thank you for your service to it. I am here tonight to ask you to pass a resolution for a ceasefire in Gaza. I'm here primarily at the gracious invitation of friends who are part of the Interfaith Families Project, a congregation that Tacoma Park Presbyterian is partnering with and in fact shared a worship space on Christmas Eve this year. I'm honored by their invitation for me to speak tonight, largely because they are an interfaith congregation made up of both Jewish and Christian congregants. I think that is a witness to the hope and possibility I trust that all of us in this community have for peace for everyone. Part of the work I do as a pastor is I have the privilege and the hard opportunity to walk with people through seasons of grief. In the last 2 days, I've spent considerable time working with 2 different families planning memorial services for members of those families that have been lost. Maybe because I was doing that kind of work, I was struck by some math I heard on media recently, that if we were to hold a funeral service every day for every child that has died in Gaza, only the children, it would take 27 years to complete those funeral services. 27 years. I long and pray for a time when children in Gaza and children in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv can wake up and be ready to celebrate birthdays and bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvahs and baptisms and life, and not worried about being bombed. Please pass this ceasefire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Schachter. I'm a 26-year resident of Ward 5. I'm here to urge you to stop all discussion of a resolution on a ceasefire in Gaza. Have a seat, folks. It has the potential to do harm to our community without serving any useful purpose for Gaza or for the city of Tacoma Park. Most ceasefire resolutions are implicitly biased against Israel, and since Israel is the only Jewish country in the world, they're also inherently anti-Semitic because they blame Israel and the Jews for the horrible bloodshed that we're witnessing in Gaza. It would be extremely difficult for the City Council to draft a well-informed and unbiased resolution without deep knowledge and understanding of the social, religious, and political problems in the Middle East. A ceasefire resolution that implicitly holds only Israel and the Jews accountable puts the lives and well-being of Jews in Tacoma Park at risk. Please don't do this. Most calls for a ceasefire ignore the fact that Hamas started this war by going into Israel, massacring over 1,200 innocent people, mutilating them with their own bare hands, while shouting, "Death to the Jews," not down with Israel, "Death to the Jews," and then running back into Gaza with hundreds of hostages to hide among the Palestinian population, knowing full well that Israel would come after them militarily to rescue the hostages and protect their people from future attacks. I have not seen a draft resolution, so I ask, if you have one, will it demand that Hamas surrender rather than allow Gaza to be destroyed through continued fighting? Will you demand the immediate and unconditional release of the Israeli hostages who were abducted on October 7? Will you demand an international investigation and express your horror at what Hamas did to Israeli women and children, including raping and mutilating women's bodies, cutting off their breasts while they were still alive, cutting out their wombs while they were still alive, and cutting off the heads of young children? Are these the people that the city of Tacoma Park wants to be supporting? And will you defend these barbaric, merciless acts with your silence? Now, lest you think that my own views are one-sided, I have for many years supported the formation of a Palestinian state so the Palestinian people can live freely alongside Israel. I oppose the Israeli occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. I have opposed the Israeli settlement movement and the destruction of Palestinian lands and homes. I have opposed all right-wing Israeli governments, including Netanyahu's. And I donate my time and money to peace organizations that work with Palestinians to ensure the human rights and autonomy of the Palestinian people. Yes, the Israeli army is fighting a brutal war, and it's absolutely tragic to see the death and devastation in Gaza. But the Israeli army is not fighting against unarmed civilians. If they were, there would be 1 million dead in Gaza. They are fighting against well-armed and intensely brutal men.
Thank you very much. We are at time. We're doing really well with sticking to 3 minutes. So let's keep that going, sticking to 3. Come on down.
Hi, council members and mayor. My name's Kirsten State. I've lived in Ward 4 for 17 years. And I know that we have heard from constituents who say that a ceasefire resolution would make them feel unsafe. I'd like to note that that's certainly the last thing any of us wants as we call for a ceasefire resolution. In fact, it is precisely out of a desire for the safety of Jews, Arabs, all in Israel, the occupied territories, and across the world that we call for a ceasefire. Israel's ongoing bombardment has not only caused the death of, at the very least, 37,000 Palestinians and the maiming of countless more, but is the greatest threat to remaining Israeli hostages and Israeli citizens, not to mention the entire region. I thought I would talk a little bit about things that make me feel unsafe. It makes me feel unsafe that despite 37,000 dead Palestinians, most of whom are women and children, and daily reports of what Israeli officials openly admit is a program of ethnic cleansing of Gaza. I live in a country that cut off funding to the UN aid organization providing life-saving food and medicine to these besieged people. It makes me feel unsafe to live in a state whose senator went to Gaza, saw children literally starving to death, called Israel's actions textbook war crimes, and then came home to vote for $14 billion in aid that will enable those war crimes. It makes me feel unsafe that a young man, aged 25, a white man, a member of the armed forces, with his entire life before him and what looked like every privilege that should have made him feel hopeful and empowered in this world, felt the need to set himself on fire because no other form of protest against the ongoing atrocities in Gaza would make the slightest impression on what seems like an utterly indifferent world. These things make me feel unsafe because it is profoundly unsettling to see the brutality of which humans are capable and the callous indifference of others who refuse to stop it. Some of the last words of Aaron Bushnell, who set himself on fire in front of the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. on Sunday, haunt me. He wrote, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I were alive during slavery, or the Jim Crow South, or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is, you're doing it right now. In Tacoma Park, what do we want to be doing as our country funds the relentless slaughter of innocents? Do we want to be those who turn our backs, or do we want to be those who show we are a world that cares? I urge you, Mayor and Council members, to move swiftly towards a firm statement urging an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and progress toward lasting peace, dignity, and safety for the Palestinian and Israeli people. A world that stands up to atrocity and abuse of power is infinitely safer for all of us than one that looks away." Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, I apologize, but sincerely, as a point of order, I don't know who's left in the room. It seems like it's mostly one group of people. I am going to probably just spend some time over there so I don't like applaud because I like rhetoric. So I just wanted people to know.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Graylin Hagler. I'm the pastor emeritus of a church down the street in D.C. called Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ. And I'm serving as the senior advisor to Fellowship of Reconciliation, which is one of the oldest peace and justice organizations in the country. And you know, I live right off of Blair Road, so I'm not too far as a neighbor. And you know, in Tacoma Park, Maryland has this reputation of being progressive. And those of us in DC, we look towards Tacoma Park, Maryland as progressive. But clearly, Palestinians are saying, and I'm coming to the place to agree with them, is that folks love to be progressive in everything except when it comes to Palestine. There's silence, and there's blindness, and deaf ears. I first set foot in that area of the country, of the world, in 1974. I got a little gray in my hair. Took a delegation of preachers back in 2014, 40 years later. Saw a militarization that just shocked me. Separation, apartheid wall, checkpoints, people being discriminated against, different license plates for Palestinians, obviously apartheid. I struggled in the Free South Africa movement in the 80s and worked in that. So when I went to Palestine and took preachers 2014, then again in 2016, black preachers in 2016, they all came back reeling because they said, I haven't seen anything like this since Jim Crow South. That's the issue. When we ask for you to do a resolution, and we're pushing one in DC right now, and as you know, city councils all across the country have passed resolutions because it creates a groundswell of opinion, particularly when politicians refuse to listen. Chicago passed one, as you know, Minneapolis, right? In North Carolina, Durham, Charlotte passed all across the country. We're asking for a simple resolution. If we can't pass it, what are we saying? If we can't stand for a ceasefire, we're obviously saying kill more of them. If we can't stand up for humanitarian aid, we're obviously saying starve them and deny them health care. Hopefully, in our progressivism, we're looking at all of humanity, and particularly right now, the folks who are being subjected to a genocide in Palestine and in Gaza.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. You should never follow a preacher. But I'm Andy Shalal. I'm the owner of Busboys and Poets, and I really love being in this community. I know we're on the DC side, but it's kind of the same kind of community, I think, on both sides. And one of the reasons why I wanted to come here to this neighborhood is because of the many phone calls and letters that residents of Tacoma Park wrote to me and said, please come here, because we love what you do, we love the progressive agenda you have, we love all the wonderful events that we do. And one of our kind of signature events we do is Arab-Jewish dialogues. We've been doing them since the beginning, since we opened in 2005. They are some of the best conversations and the hardest, as they always are. And lately, these conversations have, of course, become very difficult. But one thing that has happened is people have realized at this point that not asking for a ceasefire is making it actually worse for everybody. For Jewish people, it's making it unsafe. For Muslim people, it's making them unsafe. I'm a Muslim person, an Arab, and I feel very invisible at this time. I feel I'm not being heard. I feel I'm being disrespected. I wish the young, or the sisters that were here earlier, the Jewish sisters that were here earlier, would be here, because I really would love to hear what do they think not asking for a ceasefire is going to do. On the contrary, it's going to make it much safer. We will unite as a community, not be divided. Not asking for a ceasefire is actually causing a division between the community. But asking for a ceasefire will actually bring us together as a community to say we, as a community, are asking to stop the killing. It's not saying anything more than that. And I'm shocked that people have come here, I think 5 times I've heard, to ask for the same thing, and yet there's no movement on this. I mean, one of the things that brought me here is this incredible progressive community. You call it like the Republic of Tacoma, I think, or something like that, right? I mean, this is a city that is always at the front lines of standing up for what's right. And if there's any time that we should speak out, and like the Reverend said, what were people doing here during the Holocaust? What were people doing during other times? And it's silence. That's worse than actually making a decision, is staying silent. I urge you to please, please pass a ceasefire resolution. It's the interest of everyone, including the residents of Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we all know what this means if we've ever had to study for a final exam or the like. So I'm gonna ask everyone to please vacate the building.
Ceasefire now! Ceasefire now! Say something to Honsak.
Hi, Kara. So someone pulled the fire alarm. So we are vacating the building just until we get an all clear, and then we will reconvene.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I was trying to figure out what was going on. Thank
I
you.
can't really hear you, but I could call you on my cell. settled. So, again, I do just want to thank everyone. I felt like the conversation was going too well. So,
Too well.
So my hope is that this can keep going in the direction before the fire alarm. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and I'm looking for my cue. Bear with me 1 second. Okay. All right. So we're gonna call the meeting back to order. And where we were before the alarm was with the general public
False
comments
alarm.
and just
False alarm. Point of order.
false alarm.
Thank you.
Very much for that correction, Councilmember Small. So just as a reminder for folks, you have 3 minutes. Just state your name, where you live, and then we can keep this thing rolling. Let me make sure your mic is on. There you go.
Thank you. My name is Mark Schmorley, and like I said before, I've worked in Tacoma Park for 18 years, and I don't know, yeah, and so, no, 24, sorry. And so I'm a Jew, and my family is among the founders of Israel. When my grandmother died, the rabbi, she was 101, so they had to sort of find a rabbi, and the rabbi was excited to talk about them as the founders of Israel. And I'm sorry that the rabbi and the others have left, because what they said is something I would have said before. It's something my relatives say now, and it's the brainwashing that we as Jews have about Israel, and it's just not true. It's just not true, and it's just not true, the information that we have. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that so much power is given to something that just isn't true. And it's haunted me, and I believe it makes my relatives unsafe in Israel to live in perpetual war. And the reason that they live in perpetual war is because the rest of the world okays it. Just like the rest of the world okayed apartheid, which I worked on in college. And it was an okay thing because it's convenient and it's our military base and we can sell them arms and they can all become militarized. And my cousin was at many funerals and it wasn't funny and it wasn't, and there, believe me, in this county, I drive my son to school in Rockville, and we pass a flag store. There are 7 Israeli flags, one of half Israeli, half US. I've protested before at AIPAC meetings with 53 senators in there. There is nothing I can tell you, and my cousins, and we have lived in this county forever. My son is here, and as he said, Dad, there's just some Jews and nobody else that really thinks that what Israel's doing is okay, and we shouldn't be a ceasefire, like just nobody else. Yeah, but they got all the power, and we know that, and he hears that because he hears, this was my dinner table. This was, hey, have you guys looked at the World Court? They are all anti-Semites. They hate us. Believe me. I was at a meeting of Jews for one of the major candidates for Senate. And you know what Chris Van Hollen is to them? He's an anti-Semite, just like me. This is not, and I'm sorry, I love them. They are my family. My family is there, my family in Israel. It is nothing personal. And honestly, to think that somehow we were going to not welcome them or not have them around tonight, that we were not going to be welcoming, I've actually found that pre-warning kind of offensive, to be honest with you, because I have gotten that from other Jews in the region, and you know what? Their family isn't Israeli like mine. And I honestly believe that 15 of 17 judges on the World Court, that all you need to do is look at that. If you can't trust at the World Court, and you have to listen to stuff that is just propaganda.
You're at time.
Yep.
Come on down.
My name is Jumana Musa. I am a Palestinian resident of Ward 6 in Tacoma Park. I've lived here since 2001. I am personally proud of the ruins of Gaza, that every baby, even 80 years from now, will tell their grandchildren what the Jews did. That is a direct quote 1 week ago from May Golan, who is the Minister of Social Equity and Women's Advancement in Israel. when South Africa submitted to the World Court, they had 9 pages of these kinds of statements. I'm going to read you a couple of them from Benjamin Netanyahu. He described this before the Knesset. He described the situation as, quote, a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, in a situation update, advised that Israel was, quote, imposing a complete siege on Gaza. No electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. On October 11th, 95-year-old Israeli Army reservist Ezra Yashin, who was a veteran of the Deir Yassin massacre, I encourage you to look it up, said this to troops: be triumphant and finish them off. Don't leave anyone behind. Erase the memory of them. Erase them, their families, mothers, and children. These animals can no longer live. Every Jew with a weapon should go out and kill them. Are those words divisive? They're not mine. Those are direct quotes, and there's so many more. That is what makes people feel unsafe. When you denigrate their humanity, that is what makes people stab to death 6-year-olds in Illinois, and shoot college students in Vermont, and stab a young father in Texas, and use chemical weapons against college students protesting for peace. I come here every week now to look you in the eye, because I tried emails and I tried to ask for meetings, to audition for my humanity. And I know I have to come here and quote Israeli genocide scholars and Jewish activists and Israeli refuseniks, because my word as a Palestinian with deep history, with family from the region, with training in international law, and I come with statistics and treaties and UN resolutions and all of this, my word is not to be trusted, because I just might be an anti-Semite. I know this because I've faced this accusation my entire life. I can analyze any other country's human rights record, war crimes record, and taken at my word, but not Israel. And I've come to this council, and apparently we can pass resolutions on South Africa, Iraq, Ukraine, lots of things, but not Palestine. I'm here to tell you we're human, and we live in your community. And every time you put it off and don't take meetings and don't talk to us, your message is loud and clear. And so I'm just going to leave with the words of Desmond Tutu: if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality.
Good evening. My name is Katia Stitt. I'm a Tacoma Park resident, although not in the city proper, but I do live in Tacoma Park, the greater Tacoma Park area, and I'm also a co-op board member. I'm also, like you, Mayor Searcy and June Jordan, a Black woman. And also, like June Jordan did, I practice a politics of empathy and intersectional solidarity, which is why I come to urge the Tacoma Park City Council to craft and pass a ceasefire resolution immediately. I consider all children, I have a 22-year-old, I consider and always have all children as my children. If that is the case, I'm failing my Palestinian children greatly right now. We all are. We're completely just letting them down. I often think about what would happen if the children in Tacoma Park, right here, I've watched, where a child falls and we all rush over. A child loses something, can I help you find it? Where's your parents? What would happen if Tacoma Park children were being displaced, starved, slaughtered, traumatized, and killed, and yet every day we wait to speak up? As long as we do that, we are complicit in the suffering of our Palestinian children. I want to leave you now with a poem that was written by Zaina Assam that talks about the Palestinian children. She's a wonderful poet, Palestinian poet living in Virginia. It's called Write My Name. She says, write my name on my leg, mama. Use the black permanent marker with the ink that doesn't bleed if it gets wet. The one that doesn't melt if it's exposed to heat. Write my name on my leg, mama. Make the lines thick and clear. Add your special flourishes so I can take comfort in seeing my mama's handwriting when I go to bed at night. When I go to sleep, excuse me. Write my name on my leg, mama, and on the legs of my sisters and brothers. This way we will belong together. This way we will be known as your children. Write my name on my leg, Mama, and please write your name and Baba's name on your leg, too, so we will be remembered as a family. Write my name on my leg, Mama. Don't add any numbers, like when I was born or the address of our home. I don't want the world to list me as a number. I have a name and I am not a number. Write my name on my leg, Mama. When the bomb hits our house, when the bomb hits our house, when the walls crush our skulls and bones, our legs will tell our story, how there was nowhere for us to run. I certainly hope you think about these words. You look up Zaina Assam and you read it.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Cheryl Barnes. I live in Ward 5. I came down here without a prepared speech. I come from a long line of Orthodox rabbis. I have family in Israel, and I came here to tell you that Judaism is not Zionism. The mixture of the two is a disaster for humanity. They are not the same, but Zionists have used Judaism to justify what they're doing, which is basically a land grab. Land grab. It is not complicated. If you understand what was done in this country when the colonists came and stole land and pushed people into small squares called reservations and killed, genocided, brought disease. If you understand what was done to start America, you understand what was done to start Israel and what is continuing today. 75 years of settler colonialism. It's not hard to find that Netanyahu recently showed a map of Greater Israel. This is his intent. He will not stop. He wants to take Gaza. He wants the West Bank. He wants Jerusalem. He's going into Lebanon. He's going into Syria. Okay? This is absolutely his plan, and he has made it plain. There's no reason at this point to think hard about whether a ceasefire is in order. It's not complicated. It's made to seem complicated by enormous misinformation and money from AIPAC, which unfortunately has hold of our president. The Zionist dream and settler colonialism, the idea of taking the land and taking the oil and taking the gas, the beautiful resources there. It's wrong. What's in order in this country is land back and reparations for what was done to build what we enjoy today as white people. The right thing to do there is to demand a ceasefire, to demand a Palestinian state if that's what they want. They should be included in negotiations. This isn't a hard decision, though. And to not stand up at this point, when so many others have already led the way, means that we're not Tacoma Park anymore. We are not why did we all move here? Why do we love it so much? You know, we stand for liberal ideals of peace and justice and equality. And if we are not willing to do this simple thing, all of us will help you write it. Piece of cake. Have a vote, okay? You have 91% of Democrats in this country and 66% of all Americans want a ceasefire now. This is not complicated. So whatever you all need, if you have questions and concerns, if you want help writing it, we are all here for you.
So sorry, your time is up.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Samer Sadiq, Ward 1. I've been in Tacoma for 19 years. I'm half Egyptian, half Palestinian, and I don't have anything really well prepared. I just wrote a few notes, but I just came to voice my support for such a resolution. I think we heard a lot. I actually learned a lot today about why we need this resolution, the pressure that we actually, this very small act can really help us pressure politicians, make our voice heard. And I just wanted to support this resolution. I think it's the least we can do. I ask that we pass this resolution to stop the killing of civilians. We need humanitarian aid. These people need food, water, medicine, hospitals, not more bombs. We need more talk and less war. I ask that we pass this resolution saying that my tax money should be spent on schools and roads and not on bombs. The reason we love Tacoma Park is for its progressive values and its activism, and more importantly, resolutions such as nuclear-free Tacoma. Resolutions like that, I believe, makes us stronger, does not divide us. On the opposite, it makes us closer, it makes us more united, and it makes us much stronger. They do not divide us. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Badia Albenna. I'm Ward 2. I am here to ask for a ceasefire. I am here with a lot of frustration and vinegar asking for a ceasefire. I am the child of an Iraqi and a Palestinian and a survivor of Israel's air raids in Beirut in 1982. As a Palestinian, we are living in terror. But I don't feel that I need to audition or ask you to see me as a human. I assumed a town like Tacoma Park would know that I am human, that my suffering is deep and my fear is real. And I assumed that living in Tacoma Park with Sammy Abbott and the Iraqi resolution you passed, that is why we picked to live in Tacoma Park. Because I did not think I would have to defend my humanity. And I feel like now I have to explain to everyone that I am worthy of a ceasefire resolution. Because Tacoma Park is not certain that starving people, cutting off their water, cutting off their food, seeing children get their feet amputated without anesthesia is complicated. It's unclear if we stand on that side or not on that side. We are not asking Tacoma Park to tell the government what Israel should do and what Palestine should do to achieve a resolution. We are saying we as citizens of the United States, in this corner of the United States, do not think this is right. We do not think this is how problems are solved. We do not think this is how we resolve things. And we do not think just simply because we are hurt that we get to annihilate somebody else. We get to shame and humiliate them and make them audition for their humanity. We are Palestinians. I am Iraqi. I am a survivor of Israel's air raids in 1982. I am affected in every fiber of my being by that experience. My mother was displaced by the Nakba, and my child is affected by every fiber of their being from that experience. That is not a reason for you to pass a ceasefire. The reason for you to pass a ceasefire because wrong is wrong and right is right. And I chose to live in Tacoma Park because I thought we had some of those values cleared out here. And it is appearing to me like we are a little confused. And that is very upsetting. So, in addition, when we advocate for Palestine, we are not violent, we are not scary, we are impassioned. We are witnessing our slaughter and we feel something about it. It is not bad behavior. It is simply passion and wanting you to know we are human and we are real and we suffer and we feel this pain deeply.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Aisha. I'm in Ward 5. And I'm here to call for a ceasefire today because there shouldn't be anything political about the right to live. People's deaths, there should not be anything political about people's lives. But if we can't even pass a gesture to call an end to violence, it's really telling of how we view others' lives. We should not have the power to demean humans because of their ethnicity, of where they come from, their country. But when we don't call for a ceasefire, we're saying that they're lesser than us because of who they are. I thought we had moved past such bigoted rhetoric. You know, I'm from Gen Z. There's like this claim of like, we're the woke generation. I thought I wouldn't have to be born in a time where I would have to advocate for people like me. I'm Egyptian, not Palestinian, but I see their pain. I feel a lot of it. Because at the end of the day, those are my people. And you're telling me that they deserve to die when you don't call for a ceasefire. You are saying that you are okay with them being killed. And that hurts. And that hurts that every week people come up here and testify to you, asking for you to just recognize that Palestinians deserve to live and that you haven't yet. And I get that scary things are happening right now, but that doesn't mean that we should let them happen because we're too scared to speak up. As politicians, you have a responsibility that comes with your power. The people, your constituents, are speaking up. People all around the world are speaking up. Why aren't you? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Kausar Talat. I am the very proud mom of that beautiful child. I live in Ward 5. I am an Egyptian. I am a physician. I'm a mother. And I cannot imagine the pain and the horror of the mothers in Gaza right now. But you don't care about the pain and the horror of the mothers in Gaza, or else you would have done something. You don't care about our pain and our horror, or you would have done something. I'm going to read to you, because my words and my pain don't matter. I'm going to read to you the words of a report written by my colleague, Paul Spiegel, who is Jewish, who used to be the deputy director for the UN High Commission on Refugees and now is a professor at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, where I work. Paul helped co-author with other colleagues and at the London School a report on the projections of the number of people who are going to die in Gaza under a number of scenarios. And I quote from the executive summary: "The ongoing Israel-Gaza war has heavily affected civilians in both the Gaza Strip and Israel. Residents of Gaza are now mostly displaced from their homes and living in overcrowded conditions with insufficient access to water, sanitation and food, and health services have been considerably disrupted." So, and to inform humanitarian and other decision makers working on the Gaza crisis, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Johns Hopkins Center for Humanitarian Health at the Johns Hopkins University have initiated a project to estimate the potential public health impact of the crisis under different future trajectories of its evolution. They're going to do 6-month projections. Over the next 6 months, we project that in the absence of epidemics, 6,550 would occur under the ceasefire scenario, climbing to 58,260 under the status quo scenario, and 74,290 more deaths under the escalation scenario. This is without epidemics. We know that epidemics are ongoing right now. Over the same period, and with the occurrence of epidemics, our projections rise to 11,580, 66,720, and 85,750, respectively. 1.5% of the population of Gaza has already died. Under these estimations, another 4.5% of the population will die. How many people have to die before you say enough? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Coppell. I'm a resident of Ward 2, and I'm feeling all of the emotions of what Aisha and Kausar and so many others have just shared. And I'm returning here. I was here a few weeks ago to say that in the last 5 weeks, where folks have been coming to public comment, with the vast majority of us calling for a ceasefire resolution now, I've heard more than one of you name that you are learning about this and that you're weighing action carefully. I appreciated that candor. But in the intervening weeks, so many of us have shared personal stories, resources, language, history, data, and even research that builds a strong case for passing a ceasefire resolution. Yet we are here tonight not using public comment to debate a draft resolution, but just to implore you to be responsive to what so many of us stand ready to support. I know that principled, informed, and loving people in this room have shared proposed draft resolution language with you. I pray that we can get to a place where we can build upon looking at language together, agreeing upon language that lets us build on Tacoma Park's legacy of active solidarity, a legacy you inherited on our behalf when you took your positions. Please let us not let that legacy be tainted. Let us live up to and into the power of our voices here, to call out to federal officials to act, and to say to the world that we continue to stand for justice and for love. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for something completely different. My name is Jacqueline Moore. I live in Ward 2, and I have 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yes, you do.
You ready?
Wait a minute, let's just make sure. All right, there you go.
I recently emailed some thoughts to the mayor, council, and city manager regarding strategic approaches to get Piney Branch Elementary School renovations, rebuilding, or a relocation underway. Most importantly, I would like to reiterate that the county executive does not have the power to push Piney Branch to the top of the list. This is not within the scope of his executive powers. The county executive, a former teacher at Rolling Terrace Elementary, has lived these issues, and he wants the best for Piney Branch students. I believe that the council is aware that this is the case, and that to suggest otherwise in your public remarks is disingenuous. It also misleads residents, and worse, it does nothing to further your efforts to improve the conditions at Piney Branch Elementary School. The next thing I wish to speak about this evening relates to the city charter, specifically the portion that includes the ethics language that should be the city council's lodestar. The ethics language addresses ethical lapses regarding lobbying, financial misdeeds, disclosure of confidential information, misuse of prestige of office, etc. Title III of the Tacoma Park Municipal Code says, in section 3.04.020, purpose and policy, number 1, officials, employees, and representatives of the city will maintain the highest standards of political and professional responsibilities and maintain the highest respect for the interests of the citizens and for the city itself. Number 2, representative government depends upon the citizens having the highest trust in their public officials. 3, the trust necessary to our system of government is dangerously eroded not only by improper conduct by employees and officials of the government, but by the appearance of improper conduct as well. The ethics code is complemented by the city council's formally adopted priority that the city, quote, maintain our commitment to being a welcoming and inclusive community where all residents experience a sense of belonging. Unfortunately, over the last 14 or so months, a number of instances inconsistent with these ethics and priorities have occurred. I bring them before you tonight because thus far no other methods of calling them to the city's attention have resulted in effective action. Here are some examples of inappropriate behavior by the Ward 6 council member. Verbally accosting members of the public outside of this building, the community center, sending rude responses to members of the public via his city government email account, making condescending remarks about another council member and their stance on issues from the dais, and having these remarks go unchallenged by the rest of the council and the mayor. This was a mischance to be an upstander rather than a bystander. Sending a string of threatening text messages to a member of the public on August 16th, 2023, saying at the 10-minute, 37-second mark of the October 11th, 2023 City Council meeting, excellent, I'm going to light her up, as a member of the public came to the podium to deliver a public comment. Once again, the Ward 6 council member seatmates from Ward 4 and Ward 5 let this comment pass unchallenged. Stating during council comments that some public commenters who had spoken about the minor master plan amendment had been lying, yet when pressed he could not identify, elaborate, or share anything about what he thought were falsehoods. Laughing at a member of the public who was expressing views contrary to his own regarding the Gaza ceasefire resolution during the February 21st, 2024 council meeting at minute 58, and just as an aside, my younger brother worked as a UN official for a time, and his job was to help little Palestinian children get safely past IDF soldiers so they could attend school. So I do have a little bit of, play in this game. And so while I support a ceasefire resolution, and in fact believe that the council should have passed one many, many weeks ago, it was abhorrent to me that a person who bravely stepped forward to express her views should be laughed at by an elected official. The mayor tried to quiet the outburst, to her credit, but the damage from this conduct was done. This was a missed opportunity for accountability in a public forum. Week after week, the large "because STFU, that's why" sticker, that's "shut the F up" in case a translation is needed for you, is clearly visible on the council member's laptop to those who step to the podium to speak, and by those who watch the meeting online or via the city's cable channel. It should be so simple to just take a large sticky note to cover the sticker during public proceedings, because its presence does not engender public engagement in a positive way. I'm requesting that new and explicit language be added to the Tacoma Park Municipal Code that clearly defines and provides appropriate remedies for actions and words by elected city officials that violate the city's standards of conduct. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have any other general public comments? Come on down.
My name is Adam Diamond. I'm here to testify in favor of a ceasefire resolution. I'm a resident of Ward 1 in Tacoma Park. Israeli bombs, bullets, artillery, and missiles have killed upwards of 30,000 people in Gaza. Estimates are that about 2/3 or more of those killed have been civilians. More than 80% of Gazans have been displaced from their homes, and about a quarter are one step from starvation. This is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. The killing must stop. The hostages must be released. Many have said that the death and destruction wrought on Gaza is completely Hamas's fault. They attacked Israel with murderous designs, killing 1,200 people in one day and taking 240 hostages. Israel, as people have said, well, they have a right to defend themselves. The question then becomes, what is self-defense? On October 7th and the day after, Israeli security forces wound up killing 1,500 or more Hamas fighters in Israel in those few days. That's self-defense, as they were working to seal the border and beat them back. Dropping 2,000-pound American bombs with American F-16 fighter jets on hospitals, homes, and schools is not self-defense. There's such a thing as a disproportionate response, and this is definitely it. The IDF's retaliation for the October 7th attack increasingly looks like a plan to make Gaza unlivable. The killing must stop. The hostages must be released. We need a ceasefire now. Some have said, many tonight, well, why should Tacoma Park engage in foreign policy? This is a small city. We should just be engaging in municipal affairs. It's too divisive to take action on this. Well, 48 cities at least have already passed ceasefire resolutions, including Chicago, Detroit, Seattle, and San Francisco. And in the past, Tacoma Park has passed resolutions supporting Ukraine against Russia's invasion and opposing apartheid in South Africa. Furthermore, obviously, we live right next to the nation's capital, so anything we do here is going to be amplified and be more visible to our nation's leaders just a few miles down North Capitol Street. Citizens' diplomacy in Tacoma Park and across this country in the past and can now create a snowball effect that amplifies the power of individual citizens and advances global peace and justice. The killing must stop. The hostages must be released. Pass a ceasefire resolution now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general public comments?
Colleen Cordes, Ward 1. There were two things I wanted to talk about. First is urging Mayor Searcy and City Council that you would contact County Council Vice President Stewart and ask her urgently to make sure that the Planning, Housing, and Park Committee do not have its final work session on the MMPA this Monday because they don't have the racial equity analysis that the Office of the County Executive is doing. They delayed this originally till March 4th, thinking they would have it by then. But, thank God the county executive took it upon himself to get such an analysis going, and know that it looks like the consultant hasn't finished it yet. They've still got that scheduled for Monday, the work session. They plan to finish working on the MMPA without a racial equity analysis, even though the planning board had been promised by the planning staff that there would be such an analysis done by the County Council's Office of Legislative Oversight. They made that 3 different members of the planning staff told the County Council, the planning board that, and they also put it in the information they gave to you before your vote. So it's just urgently needed. Everything that we know about concerns about displacement, not just county executives, new comments on the MPA, but also what the county council's own legislative staff and what the plan itself talks about, the concern about displacement. Please, please urge them not to do that 3rd work session until the county council has the racial equity analysis that county executive has commissioned and has had time to review it. The second thing is I want to join my neighbors here and around the world urging you to be part of the need to have a resolution from Tacoma Park for a immediate bilateral ceasefire and the release of all hostages who were so brutally kidnapped. I think that the earlier speaker who talked about your power with our members of Congress, you will be paid attention to. You help them have the backbone to work really strongly for peace and justice here. And they know, their staffs have certainly informed them that you spent several weeks and no, you haven't yet passed the resolution, and you had it on your agenda and you took it off. Please, tonight, explain to all of us, where are you on that resolution? We need it. People are dying, and it threatens the long-term and short-term security of everyone in the Middle East. Thank you.
Do we have any other general public comments?
David Reed, Ward 2. Welcome, Mr. DeSperto. It's very nice to have you here, and I certainly look forward to working with you in coming months and years. I guess this is the 7th, 8th, I don't know how many times I've come to speak before you about the MMPA. The 2 main points of my previous presentations have been about the negative impacts of upzoning on families along Maple Avenue and on the inadequacy of transportation infrastructure in the region. And I'll be quite honest, I admit that it's very disheartening. Watch the council disregard those comments and those of my many fellow city residents, those ragamuffin economists and architects and lawyers and journalists and educators and builders with decades of professional experience. And it is discouraging to watch your embrace, and I quote, of the potential future development flexibility promised by city and county planners. No worries, they reassured us. There would be ample opportunity to avoid any excessive build out or traffic problems in the years coming, despite the inherent flaws. Councilmember, do you want to speak to me? You have something you want to say right now?
Councilmember Small. Councilmember Small.
Thank you.
Point of order. I just want to make sure that you get the time that you have
No,
allotted.
I appreciate it, and I certainly want to respect your time, but it's hard to know if you're having a dialogue with me tonight, and in which case, no, let's continue somewhere else. Thank you. So I can imagine, however, in light of this comment, that the release of the county executive's February 16th memorandum with its blistering critique of the proposed plan might cause a bit of discomfort. His memo substantiates in hard factual terms the very concerns that the citizens have expressed to you time and again, including the plan's overreach, its failure to prevent displacement of low-income residents, its conflict with the spirit and the ambition of Thrive Montgomery 2050, and its failure to address the underlying infrastructure issues. Then again, you may consider his memo to be an insignificant nuisance. Why really would hard analytical analysis matter anyhow? Nonetheless, I would like to ask you, as an elected body, are you going to respond to the county executive's salient points? And what changes need to be made in light of that analysis and the forthcoming equity analysis? What plans, what changes must be in place? I certainly do believe that you owe answers to those questions of the concerned public who agree with his analysis. So I'll close by letting you know that I'll be publishing in 2 weeks an article. It's called The Struggle for the Future of Takoma Park, that is a contemporaneous analysis of the dynamic between county planners and the elected officials at both city and county levels. As always, I look forward to discussing its conclusions and recommendations with you in the future.
Thank you very much. Okay, do we have any other general public comments this evening before we go to virtual comments?
Good evening, Jessica Landman, Ward 1. I just want to touch on a topic that you were taking up this evening, which is the discussion about multifamily housing tax credits. I know you're at the beginning of this topic, but I just want to weigh in to say that this is an issue that I see an effort on the part of the city to find a way to encourage multifamily housing construction, something that is a great idea, and just urge you to be cautious in making the objective not allow you to go willy-nilly towards something that could be far broader of a tool than is appropriate in the circumstances. Consider the possibility of creating a narrower tool for a precise objective. I've read through the proposal as it stands, and you could be creating something with so many loopholes that they could cost the city an enormous amount of resources that doesn't really serve your purpose in an effective fashion. As currently constituted, you could be creating a multifamily structure loophole that would allow the construction of, for example, of a large condominium for multimillionaires, in which those multimillionaires lived in those houses, in those condominiums, tax-free for a generation, or virtually at least 10 years tax-free, and then with massive tax breaks for virtually a generation. That's not really what you're seeking here. You're trying to encourage the construction of multifamily housing in the missing middle. You don't really need to create massive tax breaks for the creation of multimillionaires' condominiums. I don't think that's your objective, but the way this thing is currently constructed, that's what you'd be doing. So be cautious in what you're trying to do and create a tax incentive, a tax credit program that is carefully and narrowly constructed, and make it for rental housing if that's what you're after. But don't write something that will also create, among other things, there's no analysis here that considers the potential cost impact on the city of attracting a great number of additional residents. It talks about giving up tax revenue, but it doesn't talk about the additional cost to the city of those additional residents with no tax income associated with those residents. The tax costs, yes, but not the actual impact and additional revenues that you will need to expend in order to support those residents. It is a half-baked proposal, and it should not be consumed in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other general public comments this evening? Okay, we're going to go to virtual public comments. Do we have any virtual public comments this evening?
I'll ask City TV staff to confirm. We believe we don't have the person online. Is that right? Correct. We have no comments online.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all very much for coming out tonight. I know that I've heard that we've heard from many residents over the many weeks, and I want to just reiterate that we have been taking all of the feedback that we've been receiving in the room, but also online, very seriously. I will say, I will admit, I was sick for a couple weeks. I'm back. But one of the things that we have been doing over the last week or so has been following up with a number of different religious entities to make sure that what we're doing and the words that we're using are the right words. And so I do appreciate everyone's feedback. I appreciate all of the conversations that I've been able to have. And we definitely are working towards next steps. So more to come on that. With that, I am
Mayor
seeing.
Searcy,
Yes.
I apologize.
No worries.
We had an online, a video.
Okay.
A video comment tonight. I
Okay.
forgot about it. But
No worries.
we have
Let's play the video comment.
My name is Miko Peled, and I am submitting this video to appeal to the mayor and the city council of Tacoma Park to adopt a resolution calling for the immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, an immediate end to hostilities. I think most people understand how important it is for the international community to intervene when genocide is taking place. Certainly the people of the Gaza Strip and of Palestine in general do not have the ability to stop these brutal attacks that they are subjected to. They have neither the military force, the resources, or the diplomatic coverage that the other side has, that Israel has. And so they are incapable of stopping it. Palestinians, God only knows, have done everything they can, mostly in terms of unarmed, peaceful resistance, civil disobedience, and so on, in order to try to seek their freedom. And of course, we all know that all these efforts are so far not working. The international community needs to step in. Every city, every county, every state, every non-governmental organization need to stand up today to stop the violence, to stop the genocide being perpetrated against the Palestinian people. Being originally an Israeli and Jewish, I appeal again to the city council and the mayor to adopt unconditionally and immediately to adopt a call for ceasefire. And while we all recognize that ceasefire is hardly appropriate in the face of genocide, at least it demonstrates that we are calling on the Israelis to stop shooting, to stop killing, to stop bombing, and we are standing with the oppressed, we are standing with the people who are being subjected to genocide. And by the way, as the Amnesty report demonstrated very clearly over 2 years ago, the Palestinians are also subjected and have been subjected to a regime of apartheid.
So we combine apartheid with genocide, and the two
horrendous crimes that are defined as crimes against humanity. And the question only
that is begged to ask is, where is the international community, and why we even have to have this discussion, why it's not obvious, and why is it not taken for granted that cities and counties and individuals and non-governmental organizations around the world immediately stand up, call for the end of the killing, call for the end of the oppression, and as I said, for now, please, at least, at the very least, demand a ceasefire, adopt a resolution demonstrating that the people of Tacoma Park stand with the oppressed, stand with those who are subjected to genocide, and demanding a ceasefire. So please, I urge you, I think this is a demand on every single one of us. Every single one of us is going to be judged by history. Our children, our grandchildren are going to ask, excuse me, where did we stand? What did we do to stop the killing? What did we do to stop the genocide? And I know that every single one of us wants to be able to say we did our utmost. We did everything we could in order to stop the killing and stand up for the oppressed and end the genocide. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move into council comments. Councilmember Gibson.
Once again, I want to thank everybody, and I mean everybody that's come out tonight to speak and talk about primarily the ceasefire resolution. I in Ward 3 have received comments from various positions, and I have responded as I'm responding now. I am in support of some sort of humanitarian ceasefire, and the words that we use for doing that are important. So I am working with, consulting with my colleagues to choose the right words to support a ceasefire. And secondarily, I just want to speak that it's been held up. The Planning and Housing Park Committee is scheduled for Monday, March 4th at 2 o'clock to move forward with the minor master plan. I want to encourage you to follow those discussions. I presume that they will go forward. I would also encourage you that if you are so inclined to contact the committee members and express your opinion. One opinion which I personally believe is that no decisions should be made while the equity analysis has not been presented. Thank you very much again for coming, everyone.
Councilmember Small?
Thank you, Mayor. You guys can just go ahead and not turn on the timer. I'm going to comport myself as best I can. The title of this one for the last day of Black History Month is called 44. And I'm going to begin it with the lyrics by Howlin' Wolf. It's, I've wore my 44 so long, I made my shoulder sore. Well, everybody wondering, where did my baby go? So, it's awesome that it's going down like this because there are a series of anecdotes that I already planned on saying around this number, and I can now do even more. Because I'd like to begin with an anecdote about this awesome sticker I have on my computer. I was outside, but my wife texted me, so one day, when we were adventuring, me and my two Palestinian black boys, we went to a comic book store, and we walked in the comic book store, and there were some stickers, and one of the stickers was this one. And my youngest son looked at it, and he said, "Oh, Daddy, you should buy that. That sounds like something you would say to Uncle Brian Heddenberg," who's a white guy, who's not my blood relation. And so I was like, you know what, that's right. And so, and when I bought it, I told Brian about it, took a picture of it, and the purpose was to take a picture of it so that I could use it as a meme. So every time my friend Brian says something silly, I would just put it on there. But then I didn't have any place to put it, and I didn't want to lose it. And so I put it on something that I knew I would keep. And I, generally speaking, in public places, if I can help it, stop using anything that is related to fornicating under the conscript of king. I actually say the word fiddlesticks. It's actually been a computer password in the past. And so I felt pretty comfortable putting it on here because, as I've stated to many people who come in here all the time, free speech is a left-wing issue. Now, I am sore because I neglected to take my pill that I was supposed to take before I came in here. A little nervous about what was going to happen today, and forgot. And as a result of that, I had to send my wife, Palestinian wife, back home to get my pill. And ironically enough, my shoulder is sore because I'm sore. But the reason why I'm sore is because, not because I came in here in a bad mood, but because I was actually in stasis because it had been cloudy long enough that, and the natural weather patterns of this area being that inclement weather comes right around with traffic. If there's going to be inclement weather, it usually happens right before we do this. And I said something about how when you say stupid things to me, it makes me mad. It's because I can't necessarily, because it's cortisol. And so I'm already sore. So if you say something dumb, it is an actual mechanism of my illness. My wife has to deal with it all the time. You can ask her. Now, the reason why I was excited enough to not be able to process chemicals in my body was not because of anything or segregation or anything. It was because last week, Arthur, who comes every week and even comes when we have private executive sessions to verify things, had legitimate questions about accounting procedures in the budget. And I asked about it. I kind of brought it up again on his behalf because it's a thing that I had been talking about for a long time because I used to be a city manager. And so today, when it was time to talk about bills, Arthur didn't get up. And what that means is that our city manager and his assistants, and what I would hope eventually will be our treasurer, answered his public policy questions in a manner that made him not to have to come up here and vituperate against people. And I think that's awesome. So, in order, Free Palestine, in order, I generally don't let people who are afraid to speak to me yell at me. And I don't let people who lie to me lie to me. I have to talk about it. So now we can turn to the minor master plan. There's not a single thing that is in the county executive's report that I didn't bring up with the wranglings. And I was told that all that stuff was gonna get handled because there's a general way of doing business around here. None of it got handled. So what am I supposed to do? I'm just saying, well, if that's the case, I'm against it. Because I'm an elected official and I'm entitled to have an opinion. And so I express it. I'm not scared of it. I don't care. I don't care about anything like that, particularly with people who are afraid to talk to me. And I bring that up because Eric Saul, who is the purveyor of the Tacoma Courts, is got swatted essentially, or not really swatted. Somebody said he was a harasser because he made a tweet, and he put out the Tacoma Torch put out a wonderful, wonderful thing about free speech and yada yada yada, and how clever it was what he said. And I know Eric Saul lives up the street from me, and we were supposed to do this really awesome thing about gnomes and how gnomes are really the reason why people who live in certain parts of Tacoma Park have been co-opted into their performative liberalism. And this whole jag is going to be really funny. And then he stopped talking to me. He's had Kate Stewart on as an interviewed person. I even requested an interview with him, and nah. So then, because I hadn't taken my pill and I hadn't realized it at that point because I was still in a pretty good mood in the overall things, I was outside and things started flashing. And so, because I used to be a city manager and because I knew what was happening in here, and I knew where we were in the process, I thought somebody had been arrested and it was a cop car that was over here. So when I came back in and I heard it all going off, I was like, oh my goodness. And I cackled all the way down the hall because the way that you can tell when someone who is used to being in charge or used to having undue hegemonic authority over a group of people doesn't get their way, they pout. It's true. It's always been that way. It's the reason why there's political revolutions. So when I look at the minor master plan, or I look at the machinations that were behind it to where it's suddenly the only reasonable person on this is the county executive, when I really did say all of those things. And then I look at, people, trying to do whatever they do. And I talk about how much I like rhetoric. The reasons for that are, like, if you don't like rhetoric, then you can't describe something as petty. And if you don't like rhetoric, you can't describe an argument as stupid. I like both of those things. And so when I look at all of these things, the process by which we've done this, process by which we did the minor master plan, process by which we don't communicate around here, and I say this out loud, or I talk about decorum and or good order in business and Robert's Rules of Order and all of these things. And Like, I've been flipped off the entire time I've been speaking in here before. Like I'm supposed to just think that's cool? So, when you wonder where my baby went during something that is intimately important to her as a person, while petty things were happening to the issue and to me, things I've told her about in roundabout ways, because I'm not trying to diss these people, and to talk about the specifics of the ridiculousness as a citizen of this town, as a resident who interacts with the county and the state, with a Yale law degree, who has done this stuff. I'm functionally appalled. So when performative liberalism...
Councilmember Small?
I'm almost done, I promise.
Okay, all right.
When functional appalled bumps up against performative liberalism and functional obliviousness, then I don't necessarily worry so much, because now when I talk to my wife about what I am doing and why I could possibly forget my pill, she knows. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. Do we have any other council comments this evening? All right. No worries.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for everybody who came out. I've talked to some of you who are Ward 2 residents in the hall about the challenges of coming up with the right set of words. And I know it takes time, and I know y'all are impatient, but I'm just saying we're doing what we can here. And on another note, will the city manager be addressing the stormwater meeting coming up? Or do you want me to go ahead? I thought it was this coming Tuesday, that's why. Did I get that wrong?
It's changed, I think.
Okay, well, if it's changed, I'm not aware of it.
I think it's like not this coming Tuesday, but like.
Oh, okay, never mind. Cancel that, and thank you all very much for coming out and sharing your views, and thank you to, just so you know, we are all getting emails and phone calls from residents in our communities as well. So it's a challenging issue, and I really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming out and giving public comment tonight. I'm very quickly going to move on to the minor master plan. Once again, you know, a lot of the feedback that I get is not necessarily in this room, and so it's best not to work on the assumption that just because the majority of what goes on in this room might be one way or the other, that doesn't mean that that's the majority of what I'm hearing back from residents. I, you know, hate to see issues like the MMPA or, you know, we hate to say it in this room, the junction, divide two groups of people in our community. What I am hoping to see come out of the MMPA is encouraging investment in Maple Avenue significantly, so that the housing that is deeply affordable is also dignified. I am hoping to see us add significantly to middle income housing, and I am looking to see Piney Branch Elementary School get the renovation that many people in this community have been fighting for years. No one has put down that fight. No one has stopped fighting. Just because you're not the parent that's still in that school, you're not part of that PTA, doesn't mean that that PTA is not still fighting for that. And so we were promised in 2015, it doesn't get put in the SIP, and so it doesn't happen. I am open to other ways that those things would happen. what I believe is outlined in the MMPA is the most likely way for us to be able to leverage the investment in those things. And that does not mean that I'm not open to hearing other people's ideas of how that would happen. But I do believe that that what came out of the MMPA was the most likely way for those things to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Honzak.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone who came out tonight, and I am very sorry that I'm not able to be with you and present to receive residents and hear your comments in person. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all again for coming out tonight. Just going to do a quick rundown of this week now that I am officially in full effect again. So, and can be around people without a Kleenex. So I will be at the Maryland's Association Winter Conference through, looks like through Saturday. And also on Sunday, we'll have an opportunity to attend the Washington Adventist University brunch, as well as, and I thought Councilmember Honzak was going to mention the Flower Avenue Neighborhood Association walk that will be happening on Sunday afternoon, and I believe the city manager and myself will be attending that as well. So it will be. So it will be a fun-filled, activity-filled weekend. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, for city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council and guests. Just like to provide an update from several of our departments and then recognize some employees. From the library, our library wanted to share its midpoint, a few of its key midpoint statistics halfway through the year, in the current fiscal year. With youth and family programs, there's been 91 programs. Program attendees have been 2,831. And some highlights include Winter Solstice Program, Meet the Author programs with Stefan Pastis, Tricia Elam Walker, and Emily Edinger. For adult programs, there have been 24 of those, with 326 program attendees. Circulation, 21,804 physical items were circulated between July 1st and December 31st. And 2,277 digital items were accessed via Hoopla, Pronunciator, and all subscription databases. A few additional highlights. In October, the Library Youth Services staff attended Rolling Terrace Elementary School's Hispanic Heritage Month event and distributed 250 books in Spanish, English, or bilingual English-Spanish. Crochet and Cozy's program. This program meets Monday mornings at 10:30 a.m. and has built an enthusiastic following. Many of their knitting and crochet projects are donated, including 54 handcrafted hats that went to Tommy's Pantry and 14 scarves to Shepherd's Table. From the Communications Department, our Communications Department is rolling out an employee newsletter with a release date of March 18th. It is a quarterly publication and will be distributed primarily electronically with limited hard copies for those without email access. Just some of the items to be included will be new staff introductions to welcome new team members and provide their bios, internal committee groups highlighting committees and their roles while encouraging participation, and HR benefit insights. This will provide a deeper dive into some of the lesser-known employee benefits and how employees may access them. We're pleased to offer this new item, this newsletter, so that our staff can be better informed on topics beyond their own departments. From Public Works, street repairs that are underway. The city's on-call contractor, NZI Construction, will be performing roadway repairs on several streets this week. The working areas include the following street sections: Maple Avenue between Old Philadelphia and Philadelphia Avenue, Hodges Lane at Chestnut Avenue, 7400 block of Buffalo and 7300 block of Willow Avenue, Ward 1. Erie Avenue at Flower Ave, Ward 5. Hancock Avenue at Grant Ave and 200 block of Lincoln Avenue near Jefferson Avenue, Ward 4. And the 1300 block of Holton Lane, Ward 6. Additionally, repairs were completed by in-house staff in the 7500 block of Jackson Avenue and the 7000 block of Aspen Avenue earlier this month, and that is Ward 2. From the police department, Chief Duvall wishes me to share this information with you and the public. Are you ready to join the Police Chiefs Advisory Board? We have vacancies on the Police Chiefs Advisory Board for Tacoma Park residents and/or business owners in Tacoma Park. There are 2 openings for individuals aged 16 to 21. The board meets on the 3rd Monday of each month at 7 p.m. The meetings are hybrid, both in person and via Zoom. The board is briefed on all activities of the police department, reviews department initiatives and policies, and brings issues and concerns to the chief's attention. All applicants for these openings will be interviewed by a member of the board and the chief of police. If interested, please submit a letter of interest and resume to Kathy Plevy at kathyp@tacomaparkmd.gov or mail to Kathy Plevy, Police Public Information Manager at 7500 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland, 20912. And finally, a few employee highlights. From the police department, I wanted to recognize the upcoming retirement of one of the city's longest-serving police officers. Captain Richard Sipperly will be retiring this Friday, March 1st. Captain Sipperly has served the city for over 34 years. He started as a dispatcher with the city in 1987. After a brief stint as a police officer in Washington, D.C., Captain Sipperly returned to the city of Tacoma Park as a police officer. Captain Sipperly worked on various positions and held various ranks during his career. These positions include patrol officer, detective, field training officer, corporal, patrol sergeant, detective sergeant, lieutenant, patrol captain, support operations captain, internal affairs commander, and acting deputy chief. Captain Sipperly is well respected amongst his peers in law enforcement. He has received numerous awards and recognitions during his career, both internally and from members of the public. The police department will be holding a last call/walkout ceremony for Captain Sipperly this Friday, March 1st, at 11:30 in the police department lobby. We wish Captain Sipperly the absolute best as he transitions into the next chapter of his life. And finally, the HCD Department, Housing Community Development, would like to congratulate Devin McNally on his work managing the city's housing division. Devin and his staff have been hard at work improving the city's rental licensing processes, improving resources for landlords and tenants, and developing innovative policies and programs to improve the quality of housing for Tacoma Park residents. We thank Devin for all his hard work and constant commitment to Tacoma Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, so we have no minutes to adopt this evening. We're going to move into our voting session. Tonight, we have the second reading ordinance approving the FY 2021 budget amendment number 3. Would someone like to move that second reading ordinance?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councilmember Small. Is there any
Question.
discussion?
Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Small?
I was just wanting Robert and the staff, it doesn't even have to necessarily be him, to elucidate where we got to clarity on the previous concerns about the statement of this particular amendment to the budget. Thanks.
I know that a number of questions in the past number of weeks that have come from members of the mayor and council have been addressed by staff in follow-up emails. We who are here, as well as our finance director, Susan, who is available online this evening to help answer any additional questions that might arise as you consider the second reading and potential adoption of the budget ordinance number 3. We stand by to answer any specific questions that any of you may have.
And specific regard to the question that was asked last week about the junction and the settlement, the $500,000 that has been designated for that particular issue, as was released, I think, some time ago publicly by the mayor and council, it included, the $500,000 was inclusive of the initial settlement. From that initial settlement, there were some deductions for outstanding payments due to the county, due to the state, due to the city of Tacoma Park. That is the $102,000 that remains undistributed. The city is in the process of working with the county, working with the state to resolve some of those outstanding payments. And so that's in process. So we're not at a point right now where we are ready to incorporate that into an amendment.
Thank you, David. And I just did want to also add that you handled that whole thing as best as a human could. And so thanks.
All righty. So are there no more questions about the second reading ordinance on budget amendment number 3? All right. Because we have someone, we're in a hybrid situation, I'm going to ask for the clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Fulcher?
Yes.
Councilmember DeBala?
Yes.
Councilmember Gibson?
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens?
Aye.
Councilmember Hanzak?
Yes.
Councilmember Small?
Oh, yes.
Mayor Searcy?
Aye. Okay, we are going to move into our work session. Given that we had a little impromptu break earlier today, I'm just wondering if folks would be willing for us to power through. All right. Okay, great. So we're going to deal with the first item is the proposed multifamily housing tax credit. Just as a reminder for my colleagues, this session has a 15-minute presentation followed by a 25-minute Q&A, so for a total of 40 minutes. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, who will introduce the team.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you indicated, this is a work session on proposed multifamily housing tax credit. I would like Mayor and Council are in receipt of and publicly available on the website is information provided on this topic that we'll be discussing this evening. And the presentation will initiate with our Director of HCD, Ira Cowler. And Ira, you may take it away.
Thank you so much. Madam Mayor, members of council, Ira Cowler, Acting Director, Housing Community Development. It's my great pleasure tonight to introduce Devin McNally, our housing manager. I'll second the kind words that City Manager DeSpirito said about Devin earlier today. As part of your council budget priorities, you identified the goal of advancing the city's housing efforts by updating housing policies, such as payments in lieu of taxes and community development block grant funds, incentivizing multifamily rehabilitation, and addressing matters regarding code enforcement and multifamily on-site property management. Our HCD team was especially pleased to see this priority as we have been working internally on how to update our policies to better promote quality housing and quality housing development throughout the city. Tonight, you will hear the first portion of those updated policies, a proposed tax credit to promote construction of new housing units throughout the city. Just as a point of clarification, we'll be having a work session tonight to present our proposal. There's no ordinance or anything to react to. If we hear some positive feedback based on the guidance we received tonight, we would hopefully be coming back with an ordinance for further discussion as we move forward here. Luckily for you, though, you don't have to listen to me again for a second week. I will hand it over to Devin. Mr. McNally will be walking through the staff proposal, and we definitely encourage guidance as we work towards, again, a hopeful introduction and adoption of an ordinance prior to the new fiscal year. Thank you.
Thanks, Ira. Madam Mayor, members of council, Devin McNally, the housing manager for the HCD department. So tonight, I'll walk you through the kind of initial proposal that we have to get your feedback and thoughts. So what we're considering at the moment is a by right 15-year tax credit for any property constructing 10 or more net new residential units. What it's going to be is 100% of the incremental assessed value for the first 10 years and then tapering off over the next 5 years. And the goal is to encourage new units being created in the city. So not redevelopment, but new units being created. I want to give some background on this. So 40% of our rental units in the city are deed restricted affordable housing. And our median rent in the city is about $700 less than the county itself. The DC metro region since 2010 has added about 300,000 new households, a growth of about 15%. And during that same period, we've issued about 61 new permits for housing construction. This was identified kind of in the 2019 Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan, which had 3 Ps: produce, preserve, and protect. So this falls under our goal of producing more housing units. And it's also in your guys' 2025 budget priorities. So a little bit about the tax credit structure. It's an incremental tax credit. So what that means is the credit is the difference between the initial assessment and what the new assessment would be after construction is complete. So for the first 10 years, that difference between the new assessment after construction and what it was in the beginning year is 100%. So you're foregoing that revenue that would have been generated but for the development, and then tapers down 20 percentage points in the remaining years between 11, 12, year 13, and 14. And then year 15, there's 10% of that incremental value. And then year 16 onward is the full amount of the property tax. So in thinking through this policy, one of the things we thought about was the concerns about redevelopment, displacement, and that sort of thing. And what we wanted to do is provide some incentive for new units, but not incentivize the redevelopment of already existing units. And so what we've come up with is an adjustment for projects that propose any sort of redevelopment. And what you would get is only a percentage of that tax credit based on the amount of new units compared to the project itself. So in this example, what we're thinking about is if they are proposing an 100-unit property, but 90 of the units were already there, you're only creating 10 new units, you only get that 10 divided by the total project number of units, so you get 10% of the total tax credit that you could potentially get. And I'll walk through some examples in just a minute. So we'll use a couple of different examples. We'll start with a 75-unit development on a tax-exempt property. So this is a property that currently doesn't pay anything in taxes. It's a tax-exempt use. So we made a few assumptions with this, so bear with me, and I'll try not to get too in the weeds with this table. But the table on the left is some of those assumptions, what the current assessed value would be, what the current tax bill would be, and then what the future value would be. And so what you see there is, in the table at the right, is the tax implications of these. And so it shows the first is what would be the case in which the project didn't occur, the tax bill of the project if it occurred, what the credit would be, and then what the actual city revenue would be under this project. And so what you see there is because that tax bill was $0, for the first 10 years, they would pay a $0 tax bill that would slowly increase over the years between 11 through year 15, and then they would be paying their full tax bill by year 16. Another example is an 100-unit development on a vacant property that does pay city taxes. So similarly, we have our assumptions on the left-hand table, and then we have our projected potential revenues and tax bills on the others. So what you see there is a credit in which we're still receiving the same amount of tax revenue we would receive had there been no project, but then for the first 10 years, but then increasing tax revenues over the next 5 years with them paying the full tax bill by year 16. So the important takeaway here is we are not giving up any revenue that we are currently taking in. We are foregoing potential future revenue that we would get from the project. And the idea is that this would be a but-for idea of this incentive would help projects get over that final line, with the city being the last stop in terms of funding, but providing that little bit more to get that project over the finish line. So I also wanted to give an example of what that scaled project would look like. And so it's the same project in terms of the number of units, same assumptions. The only difference is that this would be a redevelopment project. And what you see there is that the credit value is significantly less than what it would be had it been completely new units, because we're only giving them credit for the new units that they create. So, like I said, this credit is only based on potential future revenue and doesn't impact current revenue. When we looked at some of the analysis, we would estimate that the subsidy would be somewhere in between $5,000 and $15,000 per unit. And this is because it depends on whether or not what the project's like revenue and assessment would be. So there is a little bit of a range there. But for some kind of understanding of what that subsidy would work out to, a typical unit costs between $240,000 and $550,000, generally depending on the materials used, the size of the building, some other factors. And this would work out to a subsidy of equivalent to being $500,000 to $1.3 million from the city. And typically, most of our grants that we give to housing projects run between $200,000 and $300,000, so a little bit more. So to wrap it all together, the idea would be is that we're promoting housing at the end of the day to provide additional housing for our workers, families, additional revenue for the city, and providing a greater subsidy than we would typically provide using our housing reserve funds. So what we're recommending is implementing a by right multifamily housing tax credit and beginning in the next fiscal year. And we would return, like Ira said, with an ordinance and language for you to review and approve. So if you direct us to, we'll incorporate work sessions and begin working with the city attorney to draft language with the hope of bringing it to your council in May or June of this year. And then later on in the summer, we would bring back a work session for looking at redevelopment and substantial rehabilitation. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Councilmember Fulcher.
I think it might be helpful for me, anyways, to have an understanding of what adding units looks like as far as the cost of city services, right? So do we have an idea in general, like what per unit the cost is for the city? Because it's not just going to be a loss of revenue. It's also services that the city's going to have to provide to residents moving into that building. And so just so that we can better understand what the true city cost is. Thank you.
Yeah, so we haven't done like a full workup of like what each individual unit would cost. What I would say is, though, as part of a development review, every project pays impact fees for services like school, fire, those sorts of pieces. And then units also pay stormwater fees and other city taxes. So in this case, what you see there is the property right now contributes, a smaller portion. In the future, with more, it would contribute more to the city's coffers as well.
So those impact fees would stay the same. We're not abating those with the.
Correct.
Okay.
And those are assessed not just by the city, but also by the county, and they're part of a development review process.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Councilmember DeBala.
Yeah, I had emailed 4 questions, but first I have a follow-up on impact fees. This is actually part of one of my questions. I need a little more context in terms of what the county also offers in terms of attractions for again, we want new housing. Let's start with that. And I get that this doesn't take money out of the Housing Reserve Fund. It forgoes future revenue, which is easier for the city in some ways. I get that. But I'm still lacking the context about how this fits in with what the county offers. And perhaps because we haven't had new development in so long, I'm unaware of a city impact fee. So could you say a little more about that?
All right, do you want to handle the impact fee piece?
Step on that one first. Yeah, I think it's a really great question. And, I think when Devin was last here in the fall for the annual housing report, one of the things that we talked about was how we have a somewhat unique, let's say, housing market within the broader metro region. As Devin mentioned at the start of the presentation, our median rent is far lower than the rest of the metro region. I think 93% of all of our units, not just our deed restricted units, our rent stabilized units as well, would qualify for sub 50 AMI renters, right? So that is not true in the rest of the county, right? And what that means is that a lot of similar county incentives are focused on affordable housing, production and preservation, right? So for example, the county offers a 100% in perpetuity pilot payment in lieu of taxes for affordable housing. If someone was in Tacoma Park constructing an affordable housing project that qualified for this tax credit would also be a part of that. But projects that were market rate projects would also be eligible for this tax credit. They would not get that same benefit from the county, right? So there is certainly a disconnect here between the incentives that we are proposing we need to offer here in the city and the incentives that the county offers. And that's quite honestly because we have different markets, and we will need to work with the county to kind of figure out how we can add some more juice to our piece here to get some more going. But it certainly is a piece that we're aware of and is, I think a broader challenge for the city as a whole and for our housing market.
Okay, so let's say that I'd like to have some more follow-up information about that because I didn't quite follow that, and it is getting late. In terms of what the county has that applies in Tacoma Park, what the city has now, and that would be both in terms of attractions and fees like impact fees. If there, I know we have stormwater fees, but the rest of the things that would occur if there was a new development here. My second question had to do with the relationship between this proposal, which is really intriguing, but this proposal and what we had said we were looking for in the housing strategy and what we said we were looking for in the budget priorities. So this seems to me like a smaller, like one piece of the budget priority. For example, says advance the city housing efforts by doing several things. One is updating housing policies, such as payment in lieu of taxes and block grant funds. Incentivizing multifamily rehabilitation, that's the energy efficiency and rehab program. And addressing matters for on-site property management. So I gather this fits in with the first one. And so then when would we be able to see, would we be talking now about how this compares with some of the other alternatives, like a pilot program, like some other kind of incentive? Or have you thought that through and so you think those other things are not relevant at this point?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about, in terms of the a pilot program, this would function very similar to a pilot program. The frankly reason we like tax credit better because it's a more accurate term of what is being offered, but functions extremely similar to a pilot program. And so that's what it would be, and that's what we've been looking at in terms of the pilot policy. And this is what we're proposing as kind of the first part of a review of what sort of incentives we offer. Previously, pilots tended to be ad hoc, kind of on a per case basis. And what we're trying to do is create an equitable and kind of standard way to handle these sorts of requests that come in. And then also create more certainty. So on our side, we're treating all housing projects the same way. And then also on the developer side, when the developer comes in, they can turn to a lender and say, this is the city's policy as written, and this is what I can expect. And so that way they can get financing to actually build the project.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. What other city costs are there besides staff time for this?
Outside of the foregone revenue, those would be the two major costs.
Yeah, well, yeah, on the foregone revenue, we should explain. But as opposed to Hillwood Manor, taking money out of the housing reserve fund to give to someone, which is subtracting from money we already have.
Right.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of tackle some of this because I feel like I've learned far more about all of these types of things than I ever thought I would prior to becoming the council. So for the colonnades at the creek, for that particular project, one of the major challenges was the fact that we did not have a payment in lieu of taxes or a pilot policy, right? So what we ultimately decided to do in that case, because that particular project aligned with the major needs of the city, and namely being a complete rehabilitation project. While there were some units that were made larger, it was mostly a substantial, albeit multi-million-dollar rehab, but it was a rehab, right? And so what we ultimately did as a city, we had the ARPA monies and we had our housing reserve, we decided to just put that money up front, right? So instead of pacing it out over time as what is being proposed here, where we're saying we're going to forego any added tax revenue that would have been generated as a result of increased assessed value of the land because it is now developed, we're going to take a bit of that loss, right, to allow for the developer to have the ability to show that as money when it comes to their financial stack in terms of what they need to get in place in terms of budgeting the project. Now, what that could potentially do, and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, because I've been thinking about this a long time, and that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation today. What this does versus what we've done in the past in the absence of a pilot policy is we are putting a lot of money up front, right? So if we have the money in our budget, like with the Colonnades at the Creek, to do a $250,000 cash cow to you for doing a project, or a $300,000 cash cow up front, that's what we're doing. This proposes that we, in essence, forego any gains that the city would receive in order to allow for us to put that money, but we're still give money, perhaps even more money, but we're spacing it out over time. And so I think that that's one of the differences in terms of what's being proposed here and what we have done in the past. I think that we have been asked on numerous occasions, because it is a very counterintuitive process in terms of what developers have to do in order to get the financing that they need. So they may have conversations with the county. The county may say, based on the nature of your project, we're not charging you any taxes. You get a pilot for forever. They may then go to the state. State may give them certain amount of monies for certain things. They may have private investors and all these other folks, and then they'll come to the city of Tacoma Park and they'll say, hey, what can you give us, right? And so I think that having this ability to be more transparent about what it is that we're offering, not only makes life a little easier for us, but it also sends a very clear signal to developers in terms of what we may be willing to provide, as it juxtaposes with things like our rent stabilization law and having to account for that, or even we were talking about impact fees. I've heard, Colonnades at the Creek taught me a lot, but our tree protections cost a lot of money depending on where you're building, right? And so those kinds of things are impact fees and actually kind of add to the overall cost of a project without like derailing things, but.
Oh, okay. I think of impact fees as a very specific fee per unit and not as the cost of doing development. So if that's what you meant, then now I understand you. Okay. So a couple more questions. So just it would help if we could get some information about what the county offers and what the context is, and why you picked this set of numbers as opposed to a different set of numbers that forego more or less revenue. What's the context there? What's the missing piece to get a developer to come here instead of Gaithersburg? And I'm presuming you've done some kind of analysis of that amount, those numbers, as opposed to the some other set of numbers. And if you can send that to us, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, and I'll say it's a balancing act, right? Because what we're trying to do with this policy is be mindful of the city's budgetary position and not be giving away money unnecessarily, but at the same time providing an incentive with the understanding that our subsidy, while it will be greater now than what we can usually do straight out of the Housing Reserve Fund, is still the last stop and will be the kind of like final bit, the gap financing, the like last mile, so to speak. And still providing that incentive, though, that shows that the city is invested in new housing construction.
I don't want to hug the mic, but are there examples of this? Okay, so I would also appreciate seeing examples of other communities that are doing this. Because I was thinking down a completely different track till you all put this on the agenda.
I think the closest example that I would cite in the region would be College Park's tax credit incentive for development. It's a little different. It's more geographically focused and also includes commercial development. They have slightly different kind of goals with their tax credit program, but it's a very similar program.
Yeah, so that would be helpful.
What we did was took a stock of kind of housing incentives across the region. And there is a table there in the cover memo, and I can send it, and we can, walk through it more.
Yeah, maybe that's what we need to do.
But there's a number of different incentives, but I would say the closest is College Park's And like Ira alluded to earlier, it is a slightly different incentive because we have a unique housing market.
Okay, just two more questions again, not things you answered necessarily the second. Can this be, speaking of College Park, can this be moored either geographically or type of housing, income level of housing, more tailored? Sounds like yes, and then it would be what we would want to do.
So, and yeah. So
I don't
what
mean to take all
we're
your questions.
looking for here is new housing, and specifically one of there's a couple of reasons why we chose a more broad-based tax credit. First of all, in terms of affordability, what we're looking for is actually just any new housing. And the idea being that we have quite a bit of affordable housing and naturally occurring affordable housing. And so we are looking for we would want new development that could come in the locations where, through zoning, we have identified that is the best place for it. And so, generally speaking, that will likely be corridor, our corridor areas that are zoned for CRT, such as the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. In terms of types of housing, the flexibility is we want to allow different types of projects to come forward that might need certain needs. That could include, for example, senior housing projects. That could be, more innovative types of projects that are focused on, studio apartments for young people who are coming into the area to work. We don't want to be too prescriptive in this. And then I think the final thing I'll say on that is that the other piece is that we wanted to create something that, from an administrative standpoint, is very clear and easy to implement as well, because it will be staff time not only in HCD, but also the finance department as well as we implement that.
Yeah, and thank you. I apologize because I went straight to the back end of the cover sheet and I didn't see the table you have in here already about different development incentives in the region. I apologize.
Yeah. And, Councilmember, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify a point Devin just made, which is staff did consider in developing this original proposal, both kind of, are there housing types that we want to specify here? Are there specific geographies we want to specify? And we came to the conclusion of no, for the reasons that Devin just outlined. First of all, what we've heard both in the Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan, what we've heard in council, what we've said several times here tonight and in the past, the city's got a lot of affordable housing. The city's got a lot of both deed restricted affordable housing and naturally occurring affordable housing. What we need is housing, period. Preferably more workforce housing, more diversity of housing types that allows folks to grow, stay in our community as they grow. So that's the main reason why we're not proposing that this is specified to a specific type of housing. An affordable housing project would still be eligible for this credit, just like any other project would be. And then as far as geographically, the opportunities to take advantage of this credit by saying 10 or more units are restricted by land use and zoning, right? You're not going to be doing a 10 plus unit project somewhere with an R60 zone. It's just not possible, right? So we will see kind of geographic concentrations of where this credit is used. But again, to Devin's point about kind of consistency of application, consistency of purpose, we didn't feel the need to kind of more define that at this moment than zoning already does and then the eligibility already does.
And so this is all multifamily, not just multifamily over a certain size. Okay, I hadn't really thought that one through. And so the last question that I sent you, and then is it multifamily for 10 and above or multifamily?
10 units, 10 or more.
Yeah, okay. So the last question that I sent you guys was the question about when we might be able to talk about the other part of this, which is protecting existing renters. Some of the questions that came up during the during the MMPA.
Yeah, so I'll highlight, this is one policy that we're bringing forward among a number of policies. I'll highlight the tenant displacement ordinance that we brought forward in the fall of last year. The great thing about the city is it has robust tenant protections, even amongst the county. And so my staff continues to work to kind of liaise with tenants, inform them of their rights, assist them with filing COLTA complaints and taking them through the COLTA process. I'll even say that we'll be at court next Tuesday to deal with a couple of landlords who have citations related to landlord-tenant issues. So,
Yeah, that said, we have asked for what more the city council should be considering in terms of protecting low-income renters, for example, along Maple Avenue in case of displacement. So should we be considering expanded displacement ordinance, et cetera? Those questions that came up during the MMPA. So we have asked, and we would like to schedule, I would like to schedule a session on that as soon as we can.
Devin, and there's an expected time, you all are considering some of the preservation and quality issues.
correct,
And so
yeah.
To the extent, I know a lot of that's
Thank
still in
you.
the works, to the extent that you can speak to it a little bit and give the council a sense of the timing would be
Ye-
helpful.
Yeah, so I think to Devin's point at the start of this presentation, the Housing Strategic Plan identified the 3 Ps: produce, preserve, protect. We're here tonight to talk about produce, right? And this is kind of the tool to talk about produce. I think the reason that we've kind of structured this credit pretty uniquely in saying that it is only for new units on top of existing units is because we want to make sure that it only stays to address that produce piece, right? And we want to, and I believe we laid out here in our, you can't see it anymore, but in the last slide of the presentation, one of the other things we outlined here was that we returned to City Council with a complementary substantial rehabilitation tax
Yeah, I
credit,
noticed
right?
that Devin
So a
skipped
separate piece to talk about how we're talking about both existing units, existing properties, and how we're supporting the quality of those units, investment in those units in a way that doesn't lead to displacement. So yes, certainly this is, again, part of a larger process that we're coming to you with. This one's quite honestly a little bit easier to talk about and easier to kind of formulate a policy
So that's
for
why this one's
than
first.
some of the preservation pieces. And so this is where we're starting, but certainly we are very excited to be coming back a lot over as much as you'll have us over the next few months and year here to kind of go through more of those policies and talk more about both what we can do in terms of implementing policies, in terms of changing code, and also in terms of coming up with these types of incentives to support existing tenants as well.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Gibson?
Yes, a whole lot of questions, and I feel like a real baby in terms of the zoning, actually housing, and obviously zoning has something to do with it. So I guess, first of all, I'm a little uncomfortable with its breadth, the lack of targeting, or I should say, how broad your purview is. I think that there's sort of been a general sense that we need missing middle, and yet it's not specifically aimed for here. We don't. I agree with the assessment that we've got. We want to preserve, and we have a lot of low income housing, and we want to preserve that. And actually, that reminds me that maybe it would be best to see these together, see the protect, preserve, and not make a decision on one without knowing what the other looks like. Because I am concerned about the preservation, and would this tax plan, this multifamily tax credit, affect the properties on Maple Avenue that are would likely, with the minor master plan, be rezoned to 15 stories, and I guess that's a question that I'll just raise. How would it change that in terms of, I understood that in the minor master plan discussions that all of those, any changes there would be optional changes, optional as opposed to by right. This would change that or not?
This would not change any requirements under the zoning code.
Okay,
So
so-
when we talk about by right for this, what we're talking about is the tax credit itself. If you meet the criteria for the tax credit, you can get the tax credit to the amount that you're allowed to in terms of new units created.
But yeah.
It does not change the requirements of development review for
Right,
any housing project.
It doesn't change, okay, but when it's put as by right, again, this, I'm sorry, I'm such a newbie in this area, that if a property owner wants on Maple Avenue with let's just say it's not even, it's a commercial property owner,
Mhm.
and they want to go from 10 to 15 stories, and they, in the process, displace, 10 stories of residents, and they'll get credit for the five new stories that they would put on, the tax credit. Is their process to approve that plan, that new development, is it the same as it will, does it change because of the by right requirement in this? Ira is saying it's not. It would
No.
still be optional.
So the process of getting a potential building permit and going to construction, that planning process run by the county would be the same.
Okay.
This does not change any of those processes.
Okay. Well, that's helpful. I will go back, and I guess I still would want to discuss further the targeting, a middle income. Is that what we need? I mean, I think that's what we've said, but I'm not the expert to say that's what we need most of, and what does that mean? What does missing middle mean? I also wonder whether there shouldn't be some sort of sunset date in this code, that, how, at some point, maybe we will have enough missing middle income, if that's what we target. So I look at the longer term on this, and let me just but raise a kind of a fundamental question, which my newness, I'll just ask innocently. Where we want a lot of we want to have more housing, so more people can live here, and so we can pay for all the things that we provide. Okay, this doesn't seem to do that necessarily. I mean, there's a long delay before we start making any money to pay for the extra services that, I guess I need to understand how this proposal, beyond providing more housing, encouraging more housing, how it actually helps our bottom line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, we're happy to share the analysis that we did with you.
Yeah.
And you can take a look at that and ask questions. What I'll kind of talk about is generally in housing production, and this kind of goes to Councilmember DeBala's question. When a housing development comes in, it goes through that optional review method. And I won't speak in too much detail because I am not an expert on that process. I would defer to the county planning and their kind of explanation of the process. But as part of that, housing projects pay impacts fees based on the potential impacts that they will have to a variety of different services that is offered by the county and the city, right?
I understand.
And so that's part of the offset. In terms of the incentive, what we're trying to provide here is an incentive that does not impact the city's revenues currently, but would potentially generate revenue. And the idea is that as it currently stands, it is very difficult to develop housing. And this provides that final nudge to help get that new housing that would not otherwise be built.
I understand that. The delay is problematic, but anyhow, I'll get back in touch with you. I've got some specific questions. I think we want to be clear about what our goal is and what kind of housing do we really want? What does it look like? And so thank you very much.
I think Councilmember Honzak will be next, but I do just want to jump in. I think it's really easy to conflate multiple things that are happening that intersect with one another, right? And you all correct me if I'm wrong. If housing is really important, but sometimes the math just doesn't math when it comes to an area such as ours where land values are very high, and we want to try to make sure that there's housing that's available at a price that we prefer, right? So you have a bunch of carrots out there. We're trying to create our carrot stack. The county has their county carrot stack, right? They may give people pilots for affordable housing or to incentivize the development of the type of housing that they want. Those are carrots that are out there. Now, your hope is that by bringing people in, that might mean additional revenue streams or additional resources for the city. It could be, I'm building a new apartment building, and now, yes, I have more people that are frequenting my grocery stores in the area. I'm building a new building. I have more kids. That now signals to MCPS, yes, we do need larger schools. Our numbers have increased now. And all of those things come into play and are thought through as part of the development process. But I don't want us to necessarily just think in isolation that housing in and of itself, if we create this incentive or this credit, means that we're just losing money, because that's not the case. You're actually, one, filling a gap in our housing stock, and then two, creating the potential for those wraparound services that are of value for our community, new businesses, things like that. So I do just want to make sure that that point is clear. And we're over time, but I do want to make sure that Councilmember Honzak, I see your hand.
Thank you. And I assume you can hear me now.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I do want to point out, as I am virtual, I have a distinct difficulty hearing Councilmember Dibala when she's speaking. So for the continuing discussion, I think maybe if you lean in a little bit, Councilmember Dibala, I would appreciate it. I hope I'm not repeating anything that you have said. I have a lot of similar questions to what's been stated before, so let me just hone in on the thing that I haven't heard yet. Acting Director Keller, I heard you talk about how you wanted sort of a flexibility in the types of housing that might get built as a result of this kind of incentive. But I guess I am particularly interested in one kind of housing that I think would really advance many of the goals that I feel we have heard throughout this process in terms of the overarching concerns that our residents have about the need for affordable housing in our city and the rationale for that over the last many decades. And that is the idea that it would be a real benefit to our local economy and to the people living in it currently to have purchasable middle income housing. Are there any mechanisms that you are aware of that might maybe be an addition to this policy you put forward, or that you might have played around with to work at that? I understand that that is not an easy thing to do, and maybe it's virtually impossible to sort of directly incentivize that as part of your housing mix. But I think it's a distinct good that we should be working towards, and knowing that it's that difficult to create, I just wonder what your thoughts are on it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's a very important piece, and I want to talk about, one of the things that is talked about in housing circles is a housing ladder of opportunity, and being able to move from a rental to maybe a slightly nicer rental to your own starter home to a slightly bigger home as you have kids, and being able to go through that whole process. One of the policies we're looking at to promote home ownership is retooling what is our home stretch program into something more what's called a revolving home buyer fund, which focuses on a larger subsidy and taking a silent second position. That's still being worked on at the moment, so I'm not ready to get into the full details today, but that idea is part of it. In terms of this specific tax credit, in terms of for sale products, it's a difficult and tricky process in multifamily spaces. What we generally see, condos are very tricky to build and are not often built. But we do offer, for example, support through our Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Fund, which offers support for tenants interested in purchasing their building. And we're talking with a few different tenant associations about purchasing their own building and converting to a condo or a co-op, like we did with 112 Lee Avenue. The other option that generally is discussed in these circles is allowing for, as Councilmember Gibson pointed out, missing middle, which is generally somewhere between 2 and 10 units on a parcel. That requires zoning changes across the county, which I believe the county is looking into, but there is not a lot of kind of zoning in the city that currently supports that. And hopefully that's answered some of your questions.
It has. I'm not sure if I fully understood that last point. I don't know if I couldn't hear a word or something, but the allowing for missing middle something on a parcel is what I heard you say. Could you just repeat that quickly or try to elaborate maybe?
Yeah, so missing middle, generally 2 to 10 units per parcel is generally what that's at, and that can be kind of that sale. Sometimes they're called cottage courts, that sort of thing. The difficulty is...
I hear you now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I follow you. But what about, is there no other mechanism for example, a large multifamily building such as the ones we already see on Maple? I mean, besides a conversion, but build to own, which to me would mean, high quality construction where, each unit can be cared for fairly well, as separate from the units next to it. I mean, you see a lot of that in the DC area. And I'm just wondering, I'm not familiar. I'm a newbie to this field as well. What mechanisms might exist, but I think it would, obviously, you could end up building a building like that, and you could end up with, $500,000 purchase prices. But at the same time, it seems like if you built enough units on a particular parcel, it would be very worthwhile if we could see those purchase prices go down to something like, $250 to $400, which becomes a price point that is less than our current housing market, single family housing market here in the city, and definitely more attainable for a lot of residents that are keen to buy a house. And to me, that's a more it seems like a more financially sustainable thing for the city to encourage than to rely on direct cash that we have to raise through things like taxes to do, tenant offers to purchase or home stretch programs, which are terrific, but they serve fewer people.
So I think there's a lot of good questions in there. I think the difficulty that has been seen in the housing world is there's a few challenges to a large-scale for sale product like a large condo. You will see them in the kind of centers of metropolitan cities, so San Francisco, New York, Seattle, those sorts of places. But very rarely do you see them outside of the kind of major downtown area. And this is for a few reasons relating to the complexity of those projects, because they are sold as individual units as opposed to a rental property, and then also differences in laws regarding what a rental property is versus what a condo is. And those complexities are a challenge actually at the state level a lot of times. And is something that I think is worth a conversation about how we can move that forward, but is just not something that we necessarily as a city could move the needle on.
Great. And we're over time for this
Oh my God,
discussion.
all due
so,
respect, I'm sorry, but I gotta say this. Let's talk about the fact that we are not talking about low-income housing tax credits. Historically, in Maryland, the way we build these things, because I tried to build them, is that you take your pro forma to the street. And if it's a viable building, you usually put a series of set-asides based on Section 8 and or Maryland law. The reason why we don't do that is because we have difficulties with our rent control system and the natural way that you build housing where people who are already families, who already want middle-class housing, who are already decent, get homes. And if you don't know about these things, and you're trying to build public policy, and the people who are trying to build it can't really talk about it because no one wants to talk about the fact, including the mayor, that we're not even talking about the way we get things built in this state. I get mad because I'm sore already. And that's why I was trying to get you to not even answer that question or the pontifications that happen up here out of ignorance. So I'm gonna go. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Small. So I just want to say thank you all so much. One of the things that I did want to highlight, picking up where he left off, is the fact that there are, and I'd mentioned earlier, that there are multiple incentive stacks for different purposes. So we hear all the time about our deed restrictions, LIDEC. A lot of that relates to state-related tax breaks and revenues, and then the county has their own pilot for low-income housing, which means for projects that are geared towards certain AMI level individuals, there are already a stack of incentives that are available. And this doesn't preclude us from offering some sort of city incentive for those types of projects as well, correct? Right. Correct. So in essence, I know that people want to conflate the what's going on with the MMPA with what we're talking about right now. In theory, let's say Essex House, for example, I still believe there's no incentive for them to tear down a however many story building. But let's say they want to build another 45 units over their parking lot, right? Under this rubric, based on the income level of the individuals that would be within those units, they may potentially be able to extend their deed restriction and do some things to get money for that renovation. But because they're creating new housing in terms of those units, they would also be eligible for that portion, those new units, for this credit as well.
Correct.
So in essence, what we would be doing for those properties that are geared towards the more vulnerable among us, we're still adding to the potential financial support that those types of development projects, if they are creating new units, would be able to receive from the city. What we're talking about here is for all of the other types, particularly incentivizing creation that in many cases is infill development that would have to basically, because our city is built out, so which is often more expensive, right? And so creating that financial incentive for those types of projects as well. Now, I know that we're often hearing things about renovation monies, where this wouldn't be that particular incentive for that purpose, right? This is about housing creation. But if what we are interested in is renovating a building, and that takes multiple millions of dollars, I think what was shared before is that when those kinds of, we're working on something for but that's something different, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that my colleagues understand that there is a buffet of options that we have as, or that a developer may be able to take advantage of when they're developing a housing project. And I'm grateful that what this staff is starting to do is take a look at what items do we have on the buffet that might be tasty enough for someone to want to invest the millions of dollars necessary to build housing in the city. And so I'm very grateful. I know I've been pushing for a lot of this, and I'm ready for the CDBG next. I want that one too. But creating these types of clearly outlined programs that, to the best of our ability, minimizes upfront costs to the city, but really do provide developers with an idea of how the city could potentially help contribute financially towards the development that we want to see in the community is just really, really important. So thank you all so much for working on this. And just in terms of next steps, we will be, it sounds like folks have questions. They can send those questions to the city manager. Do you want us to copy Devin and Ira on any questions that folks may have?
You're welcome to.
Okay.
That might expedite it.
Okay. Should we copy David as well?
Yes.
I don't know. I'll copy everybody. You all figure it out.
We'll be talking about it together, I'm sure.
Excellent. And so that would be really helpful because, as was described when we first started, the idea is that staff will kind of take some of this feedback, do some work in, and then potentially come back to us. Okay. All right. So with that, we're not going to get out of here by 11, but I am trying to get us out of here by 11:30. So next we are, thank you so much, going to talk through the library and community center redevelopment project. And thank you so much, Director Jones, for your patience.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's late, so I'm going to just dive right into the quarterly update for the progress of the Library and Community Center redevelopment project. So this slide is just a quick recap of what residents can expect from the facilities when they're completed next year. There's an expanded footprint, dedicated programming, meeting, and study spaces, developmentally and appropriate and distinct collection areas, gender-inclusive restrooms, lots of improvements over the previous facilities. And these are some recent photos taken of our construction site, as well as some of the work that was recently completed. We're working on getting out of the ground, and most current work is still subgrade. Site utility relocation work to remove critical infrastructure out of the floodplain is about 15% complete, and the deep footings are about 40% complete. Interior pier footings are underway, and a new lower garage access door has been cut, and the original door has been poured solid. So in terms of what has held up this project to date, we did want to talk about this a little bit. Work is well underway, but of course it took a lot of work to get to the full notice to proceed. And there are a couple of things that have held up the project, namely significant delays with permitting, some requiring a resubmission with discovery of underground conflicts, footing conflicts with subgrade stone outcroppings, unobserved by previous soil borings, hidden by previously existing stairs of the old library itself, so we literally just couldn't see it. Design changes to fulfill permitting requirements was a big one. The most significant design changes were related to stormwater drainage and moving the transformer, which is also tied up with mitigating the effects of climate change. So there is an adjustment to the project stormwater management plan to raise and modify grades such that the floodplain would not touch the building. This change modified the size of two stormwater facilities and required the addition of a dividing wall between them to satisfy the Department of Permitting Services comment. There's also inclusion of a channel adjacent to an existing flood wall to reduce water flow around the corner so it would not spill over the existing flood wall. And then removal and installation of a new transformer on the front side of the building outside the extents of the floodplain. And we've also upsized a 48-inch RCP to a 66-inch to provide the required flow rates. The city's architects and engineers provided responsive support to getting all of these issues addressed, and we've been very pleased with the oversight that our construction manager, Arcadis, has carried out. There are a lot of people very committed to getting this project completed to an excellent standard. So where are we within the project budget? We have expended almost 30% of the total budgeted cost to date, and that figure is current as of this week. Our current funding sources are the $7 million municipal bond, of $4 million in ARPA funds, and $3 million in grants, which includes cable grants, state capital grants, and a digital inclusion grant from the Office of Statewide Broadband. There are expected escalation costs of an additional 10% of the total budgeted costs, and the largest contributors to that right now are the delay of notice to proceed, the floodplain modifications, and the transformer relocation. The current total value of change orders, including those items listed, is about $777,000, and the project is currently about $650,000 over budget. So to account for future cost and inflationary changes, at least an additional $500,000 in contingency funds is recommended, for a total of $1.15 million in additional funds that may be needed to complete the project. But I'm going to go over some potential funding sources to cover that amount in the next slide. And we also do want to add that based on current project funds, council action or formal allocation of additional funds will not need to occur until this fall, which is next fiscal year 25. So we have identified a few funding sources that are readily available, namely the interest from the municipal bond and ARPA funds, as well as unallocated ARPA funds. The additional funding recommendation can be covered by these sources. But there are some other potential sources for funding, namely sustainability initiatives funded by the Inflation Reduction Act. These are not funds currently in hand, and we don't want to count our chickens before they hatch, but I wanted to mention it to make sure to avoid any impression that staff could be complacent about funding this project. We are actively seeking and applying for any additional funding to mitigate the financial impacts of this project at every opportunity. So in terms of what people can expect to see in the imminent future, we've got a short-term schedule here laid out that includes new utility connections in place below ground this spring, or below grade, that is electricity, water, sewer, and stormwater connections. Also this spring, we expect to have new footings, slabs, and concrete poured. In the later part of the spring, the steel superstructure should be completed, and we are planning to hold a topping out ceremony to commemorate that achievement. So that will celebrate the placement of the last piece of structural steel. And then in the summer, new stormwater infrastructure will be installed along Philadelphia Avenue, and work on the roof will begin, and we are all excited for this to start looking like an actual building. So looking out a little further, after the footings and utilities and infrastructure are in place, we expect in the fall to get started on renovations within the community center. This is going to involve closing some additional portions of the main city building for construction, namely restrooms and some recreation department spaces. We are coordinating with them to make sure they're able to carry out programming and continuity of services. And in terms of completion of the project, we are looking at next summer. Once the construction is completed, we still have to relocate everyone who's currently at 7505 New Hampshire Avenue back over to 7500 Maple Avenue to get situated in the new facilities. And the current lease term at 7505 New Hampshire Avenue is sufficient to carry us through this timeline. So we always want to emphasize that staff are doing everything we can to coordinate and communicate and ensure continuity of services with minimal adverse impact. Of course, this is still a major construction project, and there are some unavoidable adversities to be navigated, but we're doing what we can to mitigate impact where it is within our ability and control to do so. And we do thank everybody for their patience. So to that end, we are all familiar with the parking limitations on site here, and many of us are getting lots of extra steps in on our work days. And even not in times of capital project adventures, we do like to encourage folks to consider walking or taking public transit here when it's possible. And with that, I can start taking questions.
Jessica, just one point of clarification.
Yes.
Can you confirm that the 18-month timeline is now longer, and what the additional time is?
So it's hard to pin it down to an exact date because we're still in the ground. But right now, we're looking at probably next June to have the actual construction completed.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Fulcher?
I just have a quick question. I was kind of wondering, as far as stormwater management before the project and stormwater management after the project, what sort of information do we have to share with residents about the improvement that will be made since our stormwater, our own regulations are more stringent now than they were when the original building was put in?
That's a good question, and I can't speak to the minutia of it because it's sort of out of my wheelhouse, but I will say that going through this process, and in particular working with the DPS throughout this issue and responding to comments and everything, I think everybody feels pretty comfortable that we are trying to be as prepared for the effects of climate change as possible, and making sure that we're trying to be prudent and a plan for a worst case scenario, which of course you hope never happens. But I think that with something like that, with an investment like this, it's always good to protect it as much as possible. And I think that that's one way to protect it.
Yeah, I think that there are some residents that would enjoy seeing, that information.
Okay.
When you and Ian have time, because I know you guys already have so much that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Gibson and Councilmember Honzak, I see your hand. You're next.
I would follow up from my colleague here, just in terms of the stormwater. I just note in terms of environmental considerations, we didn't even mention that significant stormwater protections was a big part of what this project did. I mean, it's not only good for the residents to know, and then just a consideration. I did happen to talk with the county executive about our library and its costs, and he asked about the details of it in terms, because I shared with him what I had learned, that a lot of these delays, or a lot of costs, were based on delays by the county. Is there a way that we could document what has taken and share that with the county executive, or just for our own lessons learned here? I'll just put it out there for the city manager to consider, if it would be helpful to either the staff or to others.
We are working on that now. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. Have had an opportunity to have lots of lengthy conversations with the county exec, and then we are working on a letter that includes details regarding the steps that were taken in terms of the library renovation.
Very good.
Staff has resubmitted. I'm taking a look at it, but yes, there is some correspondence that is forthcoming.
That sounds good.
Yeah, I would add that I'm also looking forward to a conversation with the director of DPS, the permitting. I know him very well since he was my building official in Rockville, and he's doing a complete overview of the operations. He's been relatively new in the position, but I think this could be, to your point, some good instructional feedback with respect to time is money. Time and review costs us and other clients money. And so we can have some constructive discussions at the staff level in addition to what Madam Mayor said.
Councilmember Honzak?
Thank you. I just have one question. I'm really hopeful that programs are going to be able to continue to run in the summer of 2025, the city's recreation programs. Given just the realities of construction and the realities of staffing for recreation programs in the summer, I imagine there could be a lot of uncertainty as we move, into the fall and spring of next year. And of course, as you're planning for recreational opportunities as residents, having certainty is really an important factor in planning for your summer. So is it possible for the city to put a contingent plan in place already? Or I am suggesting, could one be made so that we can put some agreements into place for alternative spaces that might not be extremely expensive for this city, such as activating some of our local institutions and exploring, what spaces might be available, such as the university spaces, the even outdoor spaces with backup bathrooms that might already be accessible, but just so that you guys could offer that to our residents with certainty next summer. Do you see that as viable?
I think so, and I'll definitely touch base with our recreation department staff and see what they want to put together. Is my understanding of the construction timeline is that the recreation spaces should be done before the library is, so hopefully there won't be conflicts with summer of 2025 regardless.
The recreation spaces is scheduled to happen between probably now September and January. So those renovations and the impact to the community center should be completed before summer programming.
Okay, I mean, I hear you. I guess just given the realities we've observed so far, and then kind of seeing how we're impacted this year, and making sure that you guys are fully staffed up for the summer. And I know we don't have our recreation team here right now, but I guess I just want to flag this for if we plan now for the possibility that's a very real possibility. Just based on construction realities, it could be a useful thing to have in place. And I'm done. Thank you.
And just to respond quickly, absolutely, and we 100% agree, and we can look into that further. Right now, because construction has moved quite a bit, a contingency plan was already on the mind of REC, and so they've been thinking about how to utilize other sections of the building to do some of their servicing, but we could revisit it and see if there are existing spaces, other places at low cost that might be able to be utilized. We'll follow up with REC and get back to you.
Okay. Councilmember DeBala?
Just very briefly, thank you for all of this. And I hadn't realized how extensive the stormwater part of the revised plans is. And so I'll go back and look at some of the federal resiliency stuff and see if I think there's a match. The last time I looked at it, I didn't see anything, but I'll just give it another whirl, and if I see something else, I'll send it to you. Because I wasn't really thinking about the additional work that I now see listed here. The other thing, just briefly, the paper copy that we have is not the version that was that's online. So just making sure that gets. Thank you. Because there were some useful things in the new version. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for adding those things in.
Great. Councilmember DeBala, you're done?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So thank you. I know that this has been, just to even get to this point, to break ground, has been a ton of work. And I'm really appreciative to you and your team and Ian and all of the staff that have been working on the library project, because I know that it's been a group project, and just the mere thought of us actually having something that looks like a building this summer, I am super excited to see. So
Me too. Yes, definitely.
So thank you so much for staying tonight, but also for all of your hard work. And again, it would be helpful for me to just make sure, if there's any support that we can give. I know that there's folks who are looking into other funds that we may be able to, or grant funds that we may be able to obtain for the purpose of the library. So if there are anything that we can do amongst council to help support staff in that, letters of support, anything like that, please let us know.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So I got us out a little bit early. So it's just 11:11. And so unless there are any concerns, I'm going to kind of call us to adjourn. All right. Any? Excellent. Wonderful. Everybody have a great night.